gentlemen, it's a special edition of the Right Guys podcast. It's the 2024 presidential debate. And now your hosts, Josh Hammerling and Max McGuire.
Happy debate night in America. My name is Max McGuire here with Mr. Producer Josh Hammerling. Didn't do a podcast yesterday because we said, hey, let's do a live stream for this. It's the debate. It's take two. It's the second attempt at a debate. Well, not really attempt. The first time Donald Trump smoked Joe Biden so badly, he literally was basically forced into a home. Like the political version of taken out back to the woodshed and shot. You got to unmute yourself. You're muted. You're muted, Josh. I tried to unmute you. There you go.
Where was I? Oh, yeah. He got kicked out by Nancy Pelosi, right? Just wheeled out to the old folks' home, threatened. But the positive part is he's spent the last 18 days on vacation, like over 2/3 of his presidency on vacation. So it's all good.
Look at this headline. Harris has spoken to Hillary Clinton about debating Trump. Oh, I hope Hillary Clinton gives her all of the advice.
Yeah.
All of the advice. So we're live on Twitter. We're live on Rumble. We're live on YouTube. If you're watching on Rumble, leave a comment in the chat. YouTube, leave a comment in the chat. We'll see it. We'll put it up on the screen. We'll comment on it. We're going to try and keep track of the lies that Kamala Harris tells. We try not to interrupt too much during the stream, just because everyone's here to watch the debate. It's a 90-minute debate. It'll be 5 hours if I'm stopping and starting. So we'll play the debate, and then afterwards we'll fact check. I'll keep notes during the debate. And if you have anything you want us to mention, again, put it in the chat in Rumble or on YouTube. The Twitter chat doesn't come up yet on our streaming platform, but if you comment on YouTube or Rumble, we will see your comments and we can add it to the list. What are you expecting tonight, Josh?
Well, I started a lies list for a reason. I was just sitting here thinking, what do I name this list as I go so I could hit X every time I hear a lie? And I suspect there's going to be a lot of lies, but it's going to be a lot of gaslighting lies. Like Kamala was always for the border before she was against it. Kamala was always for for unions and American jobs before she wasn't. Kamala's always been shutting down the border. The border's our thing. So I think we're going to hear a lot of creative grammar on disputing it, right? They're going to have to be wordsmiths extraordinaires because Trump's going to go hard. He already knows this stuff. Like, I'm sure he's been prepped, but he knows her in and out. There's not much of her though, because I don't remember there being policies on her site last I checked.
There was yesterday.
Last week. Was there? Okay, so they finally had
them. They submitted them in the dead of night.
Oh, really?
Yes. So everyone woke up this morning, and lo and behold, there were policies on our website again. But they made a mistake. They made a mistake, and I'm going to go ahead and switch to screen share. They made a mistake because they copied and pasted it from Joe Biden's campaign website, and they didn't fix the metadata. So within the metadata of the code that they copied and pasted, it was basically saying urging voters to reelect Joe Biden. And this was so that Google and Yahoo and Bing, their crawlers, their spiders, as they would crawl the website, would see that as keywords, right? As search terms. So that they took the SEO. So it got to the point where if you tried to reshare it, if you reshared the link, it would pull the metadata from the page. So they literally just copied the page over to Kamala Harris's site and then made some tweaks here and there. So when you actually tried to share it, it says right here, join our campaign to reelect Joe Biden today. They didn't even build it all this time, 50 however many days, 50 some odd days, 40 some odd days. Didn't have any policies. They finally roll them out, and it's actually just a copy paste job from Joe Biden.
Here's the wild question, right? Did they care number one, like an organization that has as much money as the DNC and as much smart people out there that are Democratic donors. I mean, obviously they were doing it because they want to jump on Joe Biden's coattails, right? To ride that SEO into everybody's inbox. But
Yeah.
wouldn't that, I mean, you want to talk about dirty politics, it's underhanded, and it just shows you how weak you are. I think that's really what it does, is it tipped the hand that Kamala Harris is so desperate for online spider webbing, right? That they're willing to take Joe Biden's stuff, which is already in place, an incumbent president, right? And the jump on that, top of that. Or the plagiarism, like
Chris Cross says on Rumble, plagiarism again, just like the policies. Yes, she stole Donald Trump's no tax on tip policies. She released an ad that I believe had images of the border wall shown 11 times on an ad. She's on the record saying that she was vehemently against the border wall. She did everything she could to stop the border wall from getting built during Trump's presidency. There's going to be a lot of attempts by her to rewrite history. And what Donald Trump needs to do a really good job of tonight is not allowing her to distance herself from her own words.
Yeah, right? Her own record. You bet.
We know that Donald Trump has been coached by Tulsi Gabbard in debate prep. Tulsi Gabbard destroyed Kamala Harris's campaign by literally just telling voters what Kamala Harris has already said and done.
Yeah.
Famous clip talking about how she kept black inmates in prison longer than their sentences required so that the state of California could use them as a cheap labor source. That was it. Done for Kamala Harris. So if Donald Trump is prepared tonight, if he's prepared to actually get specific about what Kamala Harris has said, the American people know Donald Trump. We know what he's all about. We know what he can do for this country. I've been shouting as loud as I can for anyone who can hear me. I want the campaign's messaging slogan saying you don't need to imagine me fixing everything. You just have to remember when I did it, right? I'm not asking for you to have an imagination. I'm just asking for you to remember.
Real results versus the empty pages on Kamala's website, right? And she doesn't have any policies that they can't come up with their own list, right? They can't come up with a top 3 that she believes in. I mean, a top 3 is really all you need. It's all you need to remember.
The website has a lot of what we expected to be on it, right? Talking about she's going to crack down on landlords and what they charge for rent. And I'm looking at it, I'm just thinking, nothing costs the same as what it cost under Donald Trump. Everything is more expensive. So just imagine you're a landlord and you charge rent and you include utilities. Well, guess what? Electricity is up. Natural gas is up. All the utilities are up. So when it comes time to renew the lease, guess what? The lease goes up.
It's up. It has to.
Right? Kamala Harris wants to ban landlords from increasing their rents. It's the same.
My God.
It's the same top-down policy proposal as what we're seeing for her trying to tackle grocery prices. Rather than understanding and trying to fix what's causing the prices to increase, she goes at this by saying, oh, it must be greed. It must be stealing.
Price gouging. It was the price gouging, right? They came with the price gouging. They tried to make the market running on a 1% margin as the bad guy, right?
Yeah.
If prices get too out of control, the supermarket disappears. And then you're going to have to drive 50 miles to go get stuff, right? I mean, that's since they have no policy, the best they can do is demonize food or their enemies.
Her proposal to have, she wants millions of new units, millions of new housing units to be built around the country. Well, that's not going to happen if the companies that would build them and manage them can't actually break even or turn a profit. These aren't charities, right?
No.
Builders aren't charities. Commercial landlords who build these high rises, right? Take over these high rises and turn them into nice apartments. I have no love for these people, right? I've lived in some of those places before, and management sucks. All management sucks. But guess what? It's a business just like every other business.
Yeah.
And if your pipe bursts today, it costs more to fix it than if your pipe burst 4 years ago. Right? If you move out and you trash the place, it costs more to put in new flooring. It costs more to put in new walls and everything, right? Painters charge more. Carpenters charge more. Electricians charge more. Cleaning staff charges more. Josh, even the stamps that landlords need to put on the envelopes to send notices, those stamps have gone up 32%. 32% since 2020.
Yeah. And then your rent goes up, and then the cost of food rises at the same time. You can't go get the easy meal. Remember the dollar menu at McDonald's been gone for years. They had to come up with a $5 meal deal because the Big Mac hit like $20, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everything in those areas went up, and it's wild. Nothing will be the same again. And most liberal voters don't realize that when that price goes up, it almost never goes back down. It never goes back down. So this isn't transitory inflation like they were saying, right? With a soft landing. This has been a full bull run, or a bear run into interest rates, right? It's just destroying the market, destroying everything.
And here's the other thing. Remember the rent moratoriums that Biden put in place that he enacted, even though he admitted on camera that they were unconstitutional? Supreme Court shot him down, said, no, you can't do that. Lots of landlords weren't allowed to evict deadbeat tenants who had stopped paying their rent. So you want to know what else has driven up the costs of rent and leases? The fact that the Biden administration, and in full transparency, part of it was under Trump too, but Biden's the one who renewed it and took it to the Supreme Court to try and keep it. If you tell someone you're not allowed to earn a profit working your job, guess what happens when they're finally allowed to earn a living again? Their prices go up, right?
Yeah, they'd have to. It's unbelievable. And this is the economy that's been set up by Harris, right? This is all by plan. I don't think this is just bad economic policy. I think it's really a drive to destroy the American economy, to weaken that U.S. dollar.
By design.
To get us
by design.
All the way. It has to be. Otherwise, you just can't be that stupid. Right? Because most economists will say everything we've done here is the wrong idea, the wrong way to go.
The Democrat Party has perfected what I call political Ponzi schemes, right? So rather than fix the problem, they'll take from one group to give to another. Say, oh, look, I fixed it, right? Well, it doesn't work that way. That's what Bernie Madoff was doing. He was bringing in new investment and using that new investment to pay off people who were cashing out. Well, what happens when everyone cashes out in a Ponzi scheme? It collapses, right? The Democrat system of solving problems isn't all that different, right? Rather than being honest about what they can actually do, which an honest like stockbroker or investment advisor would say, okay, I think I can get 2 to 5%, right? Instead of being honest, they give all these lofty promises, and then they have to take from other people to make some of their people happy. That every Democrat policy is like that. It's picking winners and losers, right? Obamacare was great if you didn't have health insurance, if you couldn't afford health insurance. If you were paying for health insurance, especially if you were self-employed paying for your own health insurance, Obamacare sucked. If you were self-employed and didn't qualify for any of the subsidies, your prices went up, right?
It was horrible,
That was by design. Democrats picked the winners and the losers. If you were self-employed paying for your own health insurance, you were a loser. If you were poor, lower income, or even lower middle class, didn't have health insurance, you were a winner. And the goal in all of this for them is to have more winners than losers. So at the end of the day, they can turn those winners into voters, and there'll be more voters than people angry at them. That's how every Democrat policy works. Every Democrat policy works.
Yeah. And the problem is that they stack those policies in front of each other. So the Ponzi scheme just keeps growing, but in different facets, in all kinds of different places in our economy. And the system's eventually just it's gonna crash. Because looking at the national debt and how much interest payments on that is now. Combined with the low housing, with the high interest rates, with the weak dollar, the overprinting of money, the effect that COVID still had on the national economy, right? This is it's primed for a real collapse. And that's why I think it's by design.
We just spent 15 minutes talking about one little facet of Kamala Harris's economic policy.
Yeah, right.
And we still haven't even really scratched the surface on it. We just talked about one, well, actually kind of two. We talked about the rent and to a lesser extent, price controls on groceries, but mainly talking about rent stabilization, making it illegal for landlords to increase the cost of their rent more than a certain percent a year. Well, like any price control, that only works if you can control every part of the flow, right?
Yeah.
But you can't do that. Like, in order for it to work, you need true socialism. You need true communism.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, in order for the government to control how much landlords can raise their rent, the government has to control utilities, has to control cable costs, telephone service costs,
Yeah.
right? They have to control how much a painter can charge, how much a plumber, electrician,
Mm,
handyman,
mm, mm.
right? It doesn't work. It
Yeah.
doesn't work. And the problem
But
is once you get your foot in the door, right? These people, these Democrats will never admit that what they've tried has failed. Instead, what they say is, oh, well, we didn't go far enough. We need to go
yes.
further. They say
Yes.
that with gun control all the time. Like,
Mhm.
one way to look at gun control, all of these mass shootings, when they happen, the Democrats, their line is, oh, we need more gun control. The
Yeah.
alternative take is, well, wait a minute, whoa. Last time we had a mass shooting, you put forward this proposal and you said this will fix it. And it
And
didn't.
nothing happened. Yeah.
So let's repeal the proposal. But no, it's always more. They never admit anything.
Yeah, and it bundles together, and the things they do justify the things they do down the line, right? We had to control this, but now this justifies us having price controls on food, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this now justifies us to control the farms, right? They're just looking for justification. And when you look at that type of government, it's full communism, it's full socialism. And
If you want what they promise, you need communism. It's
you have
possible to implement price controls without communism, but they don't work and they crash the economy, right?
yeah, right.
The
But
only
that's
way you can even come close to actually enforcing it is with full government top-down control of every facet of the economy.
then America's lost if that's the way they believe. Because I would rather have a free market economy, right? Where we can adjust prices. The best thing that can happen to our economy right now is to just drill away for energy.
Yeah.
Having lots of energy resources has the effect of stabilizing prices and some making some stuff cheaper, right? It de-escalates the inflation.
Yeah.
But we're not seeing that coming out of the Harris team.
Yeah.
She was against fracking, for fracking, right? So now, if you just look at one of the policies we were talking about, look how the spider web leaks over, like you were saying, into energy now. And that starts to leak over into some social stuff. And that starts to leak over into movies. And that starts to leak over into local government, right? And then what you can do on public and private lands. Because justification, it's all about creating that justification. And nobody's asking for an alternative out of the Democrat Party anymore, right?
Yeah.
Like, the only answer for anything is whatever they come up with, and that's the only way of doing it. They've become so totalitarian in their makeup, their feel, and the way they govern that people can't see what they're up against. America's lost. I mean, you've
Yeah.
lost your independent spirit as an American, right?
Biden had promised that I want to ban fracking. Now, he didn't ban fracking.
You did it.
But one of the things that Biden did is using his executive authority. I say he, but in reality, it was his staffers, it was his aides.
Yeah.
It took them 2.5 years to finally reopen leases for federal oil and gas exploration on federal land, right? From 2021 all the way up to mid 2023. It was like late 2022, early 2023. They refused to let any oil and gas exploration, new oil and gas exploration, happen on federal land. Now, what they said is, oh, well, all of these oil and gas companies already have all of this land. They can just use the land they already have. But that's not how it works, right? Oil and gas companies, exploration, they're looking for new untapped reserves, right? New ways that they can get more oil and gas out of the ground cheaper. It makes no sense. Like, if they have 100 acres, but it's poor, of course they'd want to try and explore to find better alternatives. But that one policy, right, stopping oil and gas from new leases on federal land, contributed to higher energy costs. You can't tell the oil and gas industry, all of a sudden you're not allowed to have any new exploration on federal lands. Even if you pay us, we won't let you do it. And you can't do that and have it not affect the price of gas.
Yeah.
You can't.
And the price of food, right?
Yeah.
Because diesel is what goes into the trucks. The trucks deliver your food. You got to go pick up your food with gasoline, right? It is the lifeblood of the American economy. It's the current energy we use to make the machine go. But it's okay, Max, because remember, we've only got 6 years until 50% of the cars on the road have to be electric.
Yeah. Yeah.
But don't worry. They had a bunch of money to build those electric charging stations around the country.
Yeah.
With what, $4 billion, I think is what it told me. $4 bill, and they got
more than that. It was I think it was 40.
And they built what, a total of maybe 8?
Yeah,
3 to 8 is the number that I remember.
8, and one of them burned down.
Yeah. I mean, just imagine that. So they made good on the promise, and then they gave a solution that has no real viable economic outcome, or one that won't cost an arm and a leg, right? Or at least truck drivers' jobs.
Yeah, no. You talk about gas. We just talked about supply and demand, right? If you limit oil and gas companies trying to find new places to tap for energy, that is going to decrease supply, with which increases demand. Price goes up, right? What do you think happens if the federal government does what they're promising to do, which is telling car companies, as you said, most of your new cars have to be electric? What does that mean? That means fewer gas-powered cars. Yeah. Gas-powered cars are going to go up through the roof, right?
Yeah.
You know what's going to also happen? Gas stations are going to close. That's already starting to happen. Gas stations are already starting to close. In intersections where you used to have 4 gas stations, one on each corner so people could get to, you're starting to see one of them close down. Yeah. That maybe you don't need 4 at this intersection. Maybe 3 can do it. What's that going to do to prices of gas, right? You reduce competition, you're going to increase the cost of gasoline.
And that's going to further drive up demand.
Yeah.
Further demand equals, I mean, this is basic economy 101 stuff that we're discussing here. This is entry level economy. If you were to go to college, like this is where they kind of start you, right?
Yeah.
And Harris is going to be on the debate stage tonight, and either she doesn't have a command of that or she doesn't want it. Because you would think at least the vice president of the United States, who's in charge of the largest free economy in the world, would know how it works.
Yeah.
But again, I don't think they care.
Have you ever met someone who, I mean, we really don't have them on the road anymore, but they still do exist for like classic cars where you need to have a lead additive, where the cars are made to run on leaded gasoline. Obviously, we don't want leaded gasoline. It's bad. You don't want to be breathing that stuff in. Makes sense, right? But if you had a car that relied on that type of gas, you now need to you either need to rework the engine, which costs money, or you need to pay for these additives to keep the engine running. That costs money. You could see a world where after mandating that half of new vehicles be electric, you could see a world where the federal government treats regular gasoline the way that they treated leaded gasoline all those years ago, right? You could see them rolling out a cash for clunkers deal, right?
Yeah.
Where give us your gasoline car and we'll give you X amount of money for a new electric car.
Absolutely. Almost give it away. And then you'll have another situation where it is in Cuba, where you haven't had a new gasoline engine made in years. So eventually all the old cars are worth a fortune, right? And then you will go to buy a used car somewhere and they will tell you it's $100,000 for a little 4-banger Kia.
Yeah.
Right. That originally cost $15,000 in 2004 or something, right?
They don't even do this, Josh. There's a reason. You look at Havana, you look at pictures and videos from Havana, you're like, oh, wow, how quaint. They have old Volkswagen Beetles from like the 1950s and 60s and 70s. No, the reason they have that is they can't import a new car. From far away, these cars look wonderful. Oh, look at all these classics. You get up close to them, you're like, oh wow, this is ugly. All the paint's chipping. It's run on a lawnmower engine. Right? I mean, it's like, whoa, what's going on here?
Piece together Franken card, right? And then imagine but good thing we'll have a population who has like machining skills so they can make new parts.
Yeah.
Well, wait, that's not happening because if you look at most of the liberal universities, they go away from that kind of work, right? They want to make you some sort of super underwater basket weaver that knows everything about 3 or 4 cultures, right? I gave into it. I got the anthropology degree. I feel cheated. I should have gone STEM. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm writing a new book and I'm talking about social contract theory of like what man was like before they had societies. So I'm diving into a lot of that, right? Of like radiocarbon dating and all the different ways that they've dated archaeological digs. It's actually really fascinating.
It is
how they figured out. They found these bones. It was in Africa somewhere long ago, and they thought it was like a couple 100 years old, 100,000 years old. They actually found out it was twice as old, and they were able to date it by looking at volcanic rock in the same sublayer of surface, and within the rock there's a crystal, and within the crystal there is argon, right? And they know argon decays at a certain rate. So how much argon is locked in the crystal, they can tell. It's really cool, right?
Yeah.
So I'm diving into it. I'm like, wow, this is cool, but it's not what I'm supposed to be writing about, but it's very interesting. There's a place for that. There's absolutely a place for that kind of knowledge. 100%. It's important. It's vital in understanding where we came from and where we're going as a society. But there's a reason that Mike Rowe is giving out scholarships to anyone who will take them to do the jobs that no one wants, right? His foundation, I think it's Mike Rowe Works. They're putting people through trade schools because there is a dire need for electricians, plumbers,
welders. Learn to weld, y'all. Learn to weld.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the flip side of this. If we aren't able to do the jobs, we have to import people from other countries to do those jobs, which requires immigration, which is a whole other deal. I asked you today if you had seen it, and you said no. I hope you didn't look it up, because when Kamala Harris released her, and everyone waiting for the debate, top of the hour, it's coming at the top of the hour. We will cover it here. We're not going to talk during the debate. We're going to maybe little laughs or bullshit, things like that.
I'll throw those in there. If it's especially egregious, I'm going to have to mute myself and see you go.
We're going to let it run, but then afterwards we're going to do a fact check. So we want to hear your comments, your questions, your points. So if you're watching this, if you watch on Rumble or on YouTube, you can post in the comment section, and as you hear doozies, post in the comment section. We'll be able to see it later on in the night. So Kamala Harris, as we said at the start, Kamala Harris released her policies dead of night yesterday. One of the unintended consequences of Kamala Harris hiding from the press is that the press have been looking for like a scalp, right? It's not often that you get the press trying to scalp a Democrat, but when you're hiding what you actually believe from the American people, good reporters want to uncover what you believe so they can educate the electorate. And what CNN did yesterday is they ran a 3-minute segment, which I'd like to run in its entirety here, a 3-minute segment on how they unearthed a 2019 survey that Kamala Harris filled out when she was running for president. It came from the ACLU. And in that survey, she promised, I shit you not, she promised to fight for free transgender surgeries for apprehended illegal aliens. I'll say that again.
No.
That's free transgender surgeries and like pharmaceutical care, free transgender health treatments for illegal aliens apprehended and detained by the federal government. And the reason this is why the left's craziness, if you take it to its logical conclusion, it shows you how crazy it is, right?
Oh my God.
The left says that transgender care is healthcare. Okay. Well, when you say that you want illegal aliens in detention facilities to have full access to healthcare, you have to then say you want them to have full access to transgender surgeries. Otherwise, you admit that transgender surgeries aren't healthcare. So they won't do that. So they're forced into this. Here's the clip from CNN. CNN, of all places, unearthed it.
Tonight, Kamala Harris releasing details of her policy positions for the first time on her campaign website. A K-file investigation has uncovered, meantime, a 2019 questionnaire. And in this questionnaire, Harris laid out some much more liberal stances, among them on immigration. So in 2019, in what K-file found, she said she would cut funding to ICE, writing, quote, "Our immigrant detention system is out of control, and I believe we must end the unfair incarceration of thousands of individuals, families, and children. I was one of the first senators after President Trump was elected to advocate for a decrease in funding to ICE." Well, now, of course, she's touting the Biden administration's executive order to crack down on the border. K-File's Andrew Kaczynski joins me now. Andrew, that's pretty incredible on its own when you're talking about what you found here on ICE. What else did you find?
Yeah, and this was a questionnaire that she filled out for the ACLU, and this questionnaire is really an interesting snapshot in time of that 2019 Democratic primary. Kamala Harris was trying to get to the left of Bernie Sanders. She was trying to get to the left of Elizabeth Warren, and you really see that in a lot of these answers, and I want to walk our viewers through a little bit of what she said. Let's just take immigration and look at what she said here. She said on immigration, she made this open-ended pledge to end immigrant detention. She said she supported taxpayer-funded gender transition surgeries for detained migrants. She also said she supported
taxpayer-funded gender transition surgeries for detained migrants. She actually said she supported that.
She wrote and answered in the affirmative when she was asked this. And she said she also supported it for federal prisoners. Now, she also pledged to slash immigration detention by 50%, close all family and private facilities, and decrease funding for ICE, and then end ICE detainers with local law enforcement.
I mean, these are things that, you know, it would be hard to think that you would come up with taxpayer funding gender transitions for detained migrants, and yet this, as you say, written and verbally. You know, what else, you know, did you find?
Well, let's take a look at her answer here on drugs. She got asked about the question from the ACLU was, since drug use is better addressed as a public health issue through treatment and other programming, will you support the decriminalization at the federal level of all drug possession for personal use? And Harris answers yes. Now, what would that mean? Well, it mean the federal all drug possession. That's not just marijuana, which she alluded to in her answer to this question, but it also would mean
it's federal level of all drug possession,
fentanyl, crack, cocaine, things like that. Yeah.
Have they responded to you on her changes on these issues?
So we did put this question to the Harris campaign about the entire ACLU questionnaire, and the Harris campaign didn't answer any questions from CNN. Instead, they just provided a statement from an unnamed Harris campaign advisor that just said the vice president's positions have been shaped by 3 years of effective governance as part of the Biden-Harris administration. Now, they declined to CNN.
So what Trump absolutely needs to bring this up. It's a trending topic still. People hear it and they say, what? Yeah. And then they go online and say, and the fact checkers will say, yes, she said this, right?
Yeah.
And CNN, look how they have on the screen, unnamed Harris advisor.
Yeah.
Unnamed.
And he went out of his way to say that, right? So what was it like? AI bot? All right, bro, I'm going to tell you what to say, but I'm not going on the record for this.
This is an ACLU survey.
No.
She filled out and she signed. Right. And they're trying to walk it back, not with her, but with a staffer. And they're not even willing to put the staffer on the record.
Unbelievable. Man, they are running away from what she is so hard. It's amazing. I mean, she could make the Olympics with how fast she runs away from stuff.
I know. She could be she could do the high jump the way she's contorting her
backwards,
body.
Right?
Yeah. Trump needs to bring this up. Now, I think the rules state that they're not allowed to ask questions of each other. That's going to happen regardless. Donald Trump needs to ask her,
right?
What the hell? Right?
What were you thinking?
Because if she doesn't want to have to actually refute what she said, because as I said, at its core, like the issue of transgender surgeries for detained illegal aliens. Right, just let's paint the picture here. The only illegal aliens being detained nowadays are the criminal class or suspected criminal class. Everyone else is getting a notice to appear and they're getting released into the interior. The criminal class, people we know to be smugglers, traffickers, repeat offenders, right? They're in detention, and it's not immediate, right? Being deported is not immediate. You go through court processes, right?
Yeah.
You have appeals, things like that. What Kamala Harris said is that during that process, if a detained illegal alien says, oh, by the way, U.S. government, you caught me, you detained me, but I'm actually supposed to be transitioning. And I'm on all these hormone treatments. And I'm actually supposed to, right now, have a sex change.
Wasn't that in your book?
Yeah. Where is it? Here it is. Conservatives Guide to Winning Every Immigration Argument. You remembered it. You remembered it.
Yeah.
Talking about asylum for LGBT plus.
You would just have to make the assertion, I'm here for that.
Yes.
And feign fear.
Yes. But here's the other thing. Here's the other thing, right? So let's flesh this out, because it's insane. The idea that the federal government is going to pay for a sex change for a detained illegal alien, criminal or suspected criminal, is insane. Because put aside the waste, the abuse, the ridiculousness of American taxpayers paying for it. The minute that someone actually does receive the surgery, you know what they say in their immigration hearing?
What?
Your Honor, I can't be deported back to Jordan. I can't be deported back to Guatemala. Don't you know I've now had a sex change operation? And if you deport me back to that country, I'll be killed for who I am.
Terrible.
They are not as forward thinking as the United States. They will lynch me. They will murder me. They will kill me in the streets. So you can't deport me. You know what the federal judge says? You're right. You're right. Being a transsexual or transgender post-op is a protected class, because in many places in the world, you can be persecuted for who you are. Therefore, you are shielded from deportation. So in all of this, when Kamala Harris promises that she's going to give sex change surgeries to detained illegal aliens, not only is there the ridiculousness of why the hell we're paying for it, that surgery in itself is a get out of jail free card for the illegal alien. They can't be deported unless they happen to come from like Sweden or some country so progressive. Like, we'll take back all the transsexuals. We'll do it.
We have a plan.
Yeah. You know? Unless you're talking about one of those kind of countries, anywhere else in the world, they can make the argument. Like, Josh, I've said it on the show. It's in my book, which you mentioned, not me. In my book, there was a woman who was detained at the border, and she argued that she needs to be let in the United States and given asylum because she likes to wear pants.
I remember you telling me that.
She likes to wear pants.
The
reason that that's important is that in her home village in Guatemala, when she wore pants, the villagers suspected her of being a crossdresser, and she alleges they wanted to kill her for it. When she got permission to stay in the United States with the U.S. government, they said, wearing pants is a protected class. Women who wear men's clothing is a protected class because of the risk of being perceived as a crossdresser. They don't even have to be a crossdresser. Just the idea that someone could be perceived somewhere as a crossdresser protects them.
Is enough. That's enough. Yeah. The justification bar is set so low that a snake could crawl over it, right? Just kind of, just a little bump in the road.
We admit people under asylum rules designed to protect supposedly LGBT plus people because they have metrosexual fashion sense. Like, this is how crazy it's getting. And meanwhile, I'm sure you saw it. The story from, what was it, Ohio, of migrants allegedly stealing pets and eating them. Like, there was one town. Now, the police have said, we haven't received any reports of stolen pets. Well, no shit. I've had my cat run away. My cat ran away this past year. I didn't call the police. I drove around the neighborhood looking for it. Right. She came back like 5 days later. She had joined a gang.
Cat, right?
She joined
Those
a gang
cat
of
gangs
cats.
are real.
Yeah, I know. And my smart cat, she went to our neighborhood pool because that was her water source. So that's how we were able to know that she was still in the neighborhood, because people spot her. Anyway, what was I talking about? The cats. Eating the pets. Yeah. Eating the pets. If your pet goes missing, unless you see someone actually steal it and eat it, you're not going to file a police report. When Lucky or Sparky or whatever your dog's name is goes missing, you don't file a police report. You drive around looking for him. You post flyers.
Yeah.
Say, hey, phone number. You check the pound, right? You don't call the cops. And here's the thing, Josh. Here's the thing. It is well documented that in Venezuela, for example, under Maduro's regime, food was so scarce that the people of Venezuela actually resorted to catching stray dogs and eating them.
Yeah.
That is a level of poverty. That is a level of inflation I pray we never experience. I pray that Americans never have to actually look at their pet and have their stomach growl looking at their pet, right? Yeah. But that's what happens in hyperinflationary systems. So we've just imported hundreds of thousands of people from Venezuela.
Yeah.
That's one country, right? One country. It's happened in Haiti too. What do you think happens when Haiti has an earthquake or has a tornado? They eat whatever they can eat.
Yeah.
I don't judge them for it. If I was in that situation, I probably would eat a street dog if I had nothing else to eat. Like, I don't judge them for it. But what did they think would happen if you import hundreds of thousands, millions of people into the United States who have a taste for dog?
Yeah. And duck.
Yeah, you heard that story, right? Where the migrants are at the park pulling ducks out of the pond and gutting them.
In our civilized Western society, they're there for us to enjoy. But for those who subsist on food differently than you and Americans, like in America, right? Going and getting the ducks off the water, eating them right there is completely normal. But in some of those countries, defecating right next to the water is also normal. So you import these habits that are unlike what we're used to. And let's not forget the connection that some of those religions have to animals and their usage for ritual, right? And that's where it's going to get even people when they realize that. Sure, Mandy. Now's the
Mandy,
time.
we are drinking. Yeah. I am drinking Shipyard Pumpkinhead until I run out of it.
Yeah, and I have
we are drinking
unidentified clear liquid in here. But you import, ritual, right? You import religion. You import superstition, right? Yeah. And imagine how all that just becomes a really weird influence on everything around you. Cheers.
It is not possible to admit the number of Haitians we have admitted into this country, no questions asked, without bringing people who believe in voodoo. Like, it's not possible. We have to have, right? And I'm not trying to like scaremonger and say, oh, all of the illegal aliens all believe in voodoo. No, I'm not saying that. But statistically, we have brought voodoo worshipers into the country. It just like statistically, when you bring in hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans into the country, you bring in people who like to eat dogs and cats.
Yeah.
Josh, have you traveled abroad? When was the last time you went abroad?
A couple of years ago, I was in the Caribbean.
Did you eat any stray dogs or cats?
No, I ordered chicken because I knew how to order that, and I knew it was safe, and a beer because I knew that would be something the gringo could drink, right?
Yeah. I know someone who just went to Jamaica, and they said that there were like roving packs of like cats that were just biting people. I think it was cats. It was either cats or dogs, which is crazy. But
yeah,
let's be honest for a second. Who among us hasn't traveled abroad and eaten a street dog? Who among us? Who among us? Dude? Let he who is without dog in his stomach cast the first stone.
Dogs. I love them in a different way. But you import that stuff, right? And superstition's a weird thing. It has deep cultural American fabric stuff to deal with, right? There is no common culture. If you have a common culture, how are you supposed to have basic nation stuff? And it just doesn't work. And we're importing more of this randomized culture, these randomized superstitions, these randomized beliefs. And it brings with it a kind of tribalism, right? Because now those groups are not only in trouble, but they'll be in trouble together.
Yeah.
Right. And they usually start to hang out together. And then you start getting different things down the line. And this is what you get with the Harris administration, right? Yeah. There will be unfettered illegal immigration from the North and the South. Let's not forget that the North border is just as porous.
I was watching a video. We're almost at the debate. Everyone. As soon as the debate comes, we will play it, simulcast it. We'll react to it, but we won't fact check it in real time. We'll fact check afterwards. So hit that share button. Give us a thumbs up.
All right.
Comment.
Tell your friends we're on.
Comment on YouTube or Rumble. The more you comment, the more people will see it. The more you like it, the more people see it. Let's get a nice little comment section here. And I'll open up Twitter too. If you're watching this on Twitter, go ahead and comment on it, and I'll be able to read your comments in real time. In a functional system of government, if you learned that a certain class of illegal aliens were eating the ducks out of the neighborhood park pond, right? If you knew that was even possible, you would not admit that class of aliens, right? You just wouldn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's America, we're told that this is just how it's going to be. And this is just one example. I know people are disputing whether it happened, but we know that the people that we're bringing in, the economic migrants, were eating dogs and cats in the countries that they came from. We know that. That's well documented. It's not a stretch to think that when you bring people in with no money, no job prospects, no real skills, no family connections, right? No sense of community. When you bring them in here and plop them in, I don't know, Springfield, Ohio, what are you going to do? And it's to the point, Josh, where I was watching a video. I think it was somewhere in Ohio. One mother was told by her public school that if she wanted her child in preschool, she would need to pay for a translator because every other kid in the preschool class didn't speak English, so they weren't going to be conducting the class in English.
That's a load of horse shit right there. I'm pissed at that one. And that's when you know that, Max, this is going to cause a lot of pressure. Groups will start feeling the pressure. What happens when the pressure builds? Usually releases. Maybe it's just the opposite. Let's talk about a squeeze, because I like talking about squeezes, because when you squeeze something comes out, right? And that's what's going to happen to people. You're feeling the squeeze of the economy. You're feeling the squeeze with the immigration. You're feeling a squeeze with just the space in your life. And what's going to come out on the other side of that? Is it going to be a strong America? Is it going to be a neighborhood that you understand? Right? And what are we going to get out of people who are squeezed? What's going to happen? How long are they going to take it? What are they willing to do? It's a really volatile situation, and it feels tight out there. It's tense. We're getting squeezed. Everybody's getting squeezed.
Yeah. They tried to pretend that there weren't gangs, prison gangs, in Aurora, Colorado. We now know that was actually happening. And this wasn't just a gang from Venezuela. This was a prison gang, not a gang that's outside the prison that has a chapter in the prison. This is a gang that people they join it in prison. And then when they get out, they stay in it.
Yeah.
So anyone in this gang has a connection to Venezuelan prisons, taking over entire apartment buildings. There was just another one. I forget the state. It wasn't Colorado. It was a different state where they're having a similar issue of a hotel where this gang was taking over entire floors of the hotel, threatening the owner and the manager and saying, "You don't like it, we'll shoot you. We'll kill you."
Yeah.
Mandy said, I had someone call me at work and yell at me in Spanish the other day because I didn't speak it. He then made me talk to his Google Translate over the phone. Douglas County, Colorado. That's crazy.
Wow.
I used to live in Douglas County, Colorado.
Yeah.
I used to live in Parker, Colorado. Then I lived for a time in Castle Pines, also Douglas County. I would not expect to see that in Douglas County, hear about that in Douglas County. But that really speaks to what this administration has done, right? gone are the days where a bunch of Somalian migrants come in the country and, oh, let's go all settle in Minnesota, right? Or a bunch of Arabs come in the country. Oh, we'll go settle in Dearborn, Michigan.
Yeah.
When you bring people in the country and there isn't like an active diaspora already in the United States, they're resettling them everywhere at random. And they're not telling the towns or cities where they're sending them. Right. And I'm a Catholic, but Catholic Charities is helping out with this. And I can't support that. Resettling illegal aliens. And the cynic in me says it has a lot to do with the census. A lot to do with the census, because when the census takers come around, they don't count voters, they don't count citizens, they count people. So New York lost a congressional seat this past census by, I want to say, like tens of thousands of people. It was a very small amount that they missed the mark. If they had counted just a few more thousand people, they would have gotten an extra congressional seat. Right? So just think about, since that 2020 census, think about all the illegal aliens and the migrants that have been resettled in New York. Way more than that difference, right? And New York Congresswoman, I forget her name, she said on the record that this is what it was all about. We need these people. We need these bodies for the census takers.
My God. Hey, can I
1.5 minutes out.
So just quickly, I want everyone to realize that talking to people, we'll say in law enforcement, that these gangs that come from the other countries have no respect for human life either. Because there's places where they have kill houses where all they do is just fill these houses with pieces and people. And that's not an exaggeration. Their level of violence in their gangs is on par with something that you wouldn't expect to see in horror movies. And it's getting imported, right? So how long before somebody buys a house and they start finding stuff in walls that's not supposed to be there, right? Because how many of these groups end up doing the building of your homes or the building of our schools? I mean, every facet of American life is being completely rewritten. And you're either going to watch it or you're going to not.
We're half a minute away, 30 seconds away. Grab your beer, grab your wine, grab whatever you're going to be drinking.
Getting nervous.
No drinking game tonight. Donald Trump's got to come out swinging. He's got to hold her accountable. Don't get angry. Don't fall for the traps. Don't set her up. We know she wants to be able to say, "Excuse me, I'm talking," which is why she wanted his mic turned on. You can't take the bait. Hit that thumbs up, everyone. Like this post, subscribe, comment, share. We'll be back at the end of the debate and we'll be fact checking. But here we go. Here is the second presidential debate.
Here, our
not ready.
Not ready. They clutched on us. Yeah.
I thought this was ready to go. That was
really what do you think Trump should try to cover first?
We'll take you there.
Here we go. Here we go.
There we go. Yeah.
Meeting ever.
A historic race for president upended just weeks ago. President Biden withdrawing after his last debate. Donald Trump now up against a new opponent.
The candidates separated by the smallest of margins, essentially tied in the polls.
If you hear a lie,
the key
post on YouTube, post on Rumble,
right here in Pennsylvania,
and we'll bring it up at
still
the end.
Very much in play. The ABC News presidential debate starts right now.
This is an ABC News special. The most consequential moment of this campaign. Kamala Harris.
Together, we will chart a new way forward.
Donald Trump.
We will soon be a great nation again.
Face to face. Historic. The ABC News presidential debate. Here now, David Muir.
Will they shake hands? Will they shake hands?
Good evening. I'm David Muir, and thank you for joining us for tonight's presidential debate.
I'm going to take yes on that one.
Watching on ABC and around the world tonight. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump are just moments away from taking the stage in this unprecedented race for president.
And I'm Lindsay Davis. Tonight's meeting could be the most consequential event of their campaigns, with Election Day now less than 2 months away. For Vice President Kamala Harris, this is her first debate since President Biden withdrew from the race on July 21st. Of course, that decision followed his debate against President Donald Trump in June. Since then, this race has taken on an entirely new dynamic.
And that brings us to the rules of tonight's debate. 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. No topics or questions have been shared with the campaigns. The candidates will have 2 minutes to answer questions, and this is the clock That's what they'll be seeing. 2 minutes for rebuttals and 1 minute for follow-ups, clarifications, or responses. Their microphones will only be turned on when it's their turn to speak. No pre-written notes allowed. There is no audience here tonight in this hall at the National Constitution Center. This is an intimate setting for two candidates who have never met.
President Trump won the coin toss. He chose to deliver the final closing statement of the evening. Vice President Harris selected the podium to the right.
So let's now welcome the candidates to the stage. Vice President Kamala Harris and President Donald Trump.
Kamala Harris.
Let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun. Thank you.
Welcome to you both.
Did
It's
she just
wonderful to have you.
introduce
It's an honor
herself?
to have you both here tonight.
Good evening. We are looking forward to a spirited and thoughtful debate.
So let's get started. I want to
She just
begin tonight with
introduced
the
herself?
issue that voters repeatedly say is
Shook
their
hands.
number one issue, and that is the economy and the cost of living in this country. Vice President Harris, you and President Trump were elected 4 years ago.
Trump looks
and your
good.
opponent on the stage here tonight often asks his supporters, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? When it comes to the economy, do you believe Americans are better off than they were 4 years ago?
So I was raised as a middle class kid, and I am actually the only person on this stage who has a plan that is about lifting up the middle class and working people of America. I believe in the ambition, the aspirations, the dreams of the American people. And that is why I imagine and have actually a plan to build what I call an opportunity economy. Because here's the thing. We know that we have a shortage of homes and housing, and the cost of housing is too expensive for far too many people. We know that young families need support to raise their children, and I intend on extending a tax cut for those families of $6,000, which is the largest child tax credit that we have given in a long time, so that those young families can afford to buy a crib, buy a car seat, buy clothes for their children. My passion, one of them, is small businesses. My mother raised my sister and me, but there was a woman who helped raise us. We call her our second mother. She was a small business owner. I love our small businesses. My plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to start up small businesses, knowing they are part of the backbone of America's economy. My opponent, on the other hand, his plan is to do what he has done before, which is to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations, which will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. My opponent has a plan that I call the Trump's sales tax, which would be a 20% tax on everyday goods that you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that Trump sales tax would actually result for middle-class families in about $4,000 more a year because of his policies and his ideas about what should be the backs of middle-class people paying for tax cuts for billionaires.
President Trump, I'll give you 2 minutes.
First of all, I have no sales tax. That's an incorrect statement. She knows that. We're doing tariffs on other countries. Other countries are going to finally, after 75 years, pay us back for all that we've done for the world. And the tariff will be substantial in some cases. I took in billions and billions of dollars, as you know, from China. In fact, they never took the tariff off because there was so much money they can't. It would totally destroy everything that they've set out to do. They're taking in billions of dollars from China and other places. They've left the tariffs on. When I had it, I had tariffs, and yet I had no inflation. Look, we've had a terrible economy because inflation which is really known as a country buster. It breaks up countries. We have inflation like very few people have ever seen before, probably the worst in our nation's history. We were at 21%, but that's being generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people, for the middle class, but for every class. On top of that, we have millions of people pouring into our country from prisons and jails, from mental institutions and insane asylums, and they're coming in and they're taking jobs that are occupied right now by African Americans and Hispanics, and also unions. Unions are going to be affected very soon. And you see what's happening. You see what's happening with towns throughout the United States. You look at Springfield, Ohio. You look at Aurora in Colorado. They are taking over the towns. They're taking over buildings. They're going in violently. These are the people that Xi and Biden led into our country, and they're destroying our country. They're dangerous. They're at the highest level of criminality. and we have to get them out. We have to get them out fast. I created one of the greatest economies in the history of our country. I'll do it again and even better.
We are going to get to immigration and border security during this debate, but I would like to let Vice President Harris respond on the economy here.
Well, I would love to. Let's talk about what Donald Trump left us. Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. Donald Trump left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. Donald Trump left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done and what I intend to do is build on what we know are the aspirations and the hopes of the American people. But I'm going to tell you all in this debate tonight, you're going to hear from the same old tired playbook, a bunch of lies, grievances, and name calling. What you're going to hear tonight is a detailed and dangerous plan called Project 2025 that the former president intends on implementing if he were elected again. I believe very strongly that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing us together, knowing we have so much more in common than what separates us. And I pledge to you to be a president for all Americans.
President Trump will give you a minute here to respond.
Number one, I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy like I did before. We had the greatest economy. We got hit with a pandemic. And the pandemic was not since 1917, where 100 million people died, has there been anything like it. We did a phenomenal job with the pandemic. We handed them over a country where the economy and where the stock market was higher than it was before the pandemic came in. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. We made ventilators for the entire world. We got gowns, we got masks, we did things that nobody thought possible. And people give me credit for rebuilding the military. They give me credit for a lot of things, but not enough credit for the great job we did with the pandemic. But the only jobs they got were bounce back jobs. These were jobs bounced back, and it bounced back and it went to their benefit. But I was the one that created them. They know it, and so does everybody else.
Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond.
So Donald Trump has no plan for you. And when you look at his economic plan, it's all about tax breaks for the richest people. I am offering what I describe as an opportunity economy, and the best economists in our country, if not the world, have reviewed our relative plans for the future of America. What Goldman Sachs has said is that Donald Trump's plan would make the economy worse. Mine would strengthen the economy. What the Wharton School has said is Donald Trump's plan would actually explode the deficit. 16 Nobel laureates have described his economic plan as something that would increase inflation and by the middle of next year would invite a recession. You just have to look at where we are and where we stand on the issues. And I'd invite you to know that Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself
Which is it?
than he is in looking out.
Does he have no plan, or is it Project 2025?
Look, I went to the Wharton School of Finance, and many of those professors, the top professors, think my plan is a brilliant plan. It's a great plan. It's a plan that's going to bring up our worth, our value as a country. It's going to make people want to be able to go and work and create jobs and create a lot of good, solid money for our country. And just to finish off, she doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes. She doesn't have a plan. Take a look at her plan. She doesn't have a plan.
Mr. President, I do want to drill down on something you both brought up. The Vice President brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, you know, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response. And you heard what the president said there, because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this, with COVID, is he actually thanked President Xi for what he did during COVID. Look at his tweet. Thank you, President Xi, exclamation point, when we know that Xi was responsible for lacking and not giving us transparency about the origins of COVID.
President Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump, thank you. Lindsay?
I want to turn to the issue of abortion. President Trump, you've often touted that you were able to kill Roe v. Wade. Last year, you said that you were proud to be the most pro-life president in American history. Then last month, you said that your administration would be great for women and their reproductive rights. In your home state of Florida, you surprised many with regard to your 6-week abortion ban, because you initially had said that it was too short. And you said, quote, I'm going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks. But then the very next day, you reversed course and said you would vote to support the 6-week ban. Vice President Harris says that women shouldn't trust you on the issue of abortion because you've changed your position so many times. Therefore, why should they trust you?
Well, the reason I'm doing that vote is because the plan is, as you know, the vote is, they have abortion in the 9th month. They even have, and you can look at the governor of West Virginia, the previous governor of West Virginia, not the current governor, who's doing an excellent job, but the governor before, He said the baby will be born and we will decide what to do with the baby. In other words, we'll execute the baby. And that's why I did that, because that predominates, because they're radical. The Democrats are radical in that. And her vice presidential pick, which I think was a horrible pick, by the way, for our country, because he is really out of it. But her vice presidential pick says abortion in the 9th month is absolutely fine. He also says execution after birth. It's execution, no longer abortion, because the baby is born, is okay. And that's not okay with me, hence the vote. But what I did is something for 52 years, they've been trying to get Roe v. Wade into the states. And through the genius and heart and strength of 6 Supreme Court justices, we were able to do that. Now, I believe in the exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. I believe strongly in it. Ronald Reagan did also. 85% of Republicans do. Exceptions, very important. But we were able to get it, and now states are voting on it. And for the first time, you're going to see, look, this is an issue that's torn our country apart for 52 years. Every legal scholar, every Democrat, every Republican, liberal, conservative, they all wanted this issue to be brought back to the states where the people could vote. And that's what happened. Now, Ohio, the vote was somewhat liberal. Kansas, the vote was somewhat liberal, much more liberal than people would have thought. But each individual state is voting. It's the vote of the people now. It's not tied up in the federal government. I did a great service in doing it. It took courage to do it. And the Supreme Court had great courage in doing it. And I give tremendous credit to those 6 justices.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born. Madam Vice President, I want to get your response to President Trump.
Well, as I said, you're going to hear a bunch of lies, and that's not actually a surprising fact. Let's understand how we got here. Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did exactly as he intended. And now in over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or nurse to provide health care. In one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans that make no exception even for rape and incest, which understand what that means. A survivor of a crime of violation to their body does not have the right to make a decision about what happens to their body next. That is immoral. And one does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that.
Not
a 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term. They don't want that. And I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protections of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. But understand, if Donald Trump were to be reelected, he will sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in his Project 2025, there would be a national abortion, a monitor that would be monitoring your pregnancies, your miscarriages. I think the American people believe that certain freedoms, in particular the freedom to make decisions about one's own body, should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President
Harris. Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban, because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter, because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came
Well,
to
I
your
won't
desk?
have to, because again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50 and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by the Supreme Court. So all these students got taunted with this whole thing about this whole idea, and how unfair that would have been. Part of the reason they lost to the millions and millions of people that had to pay off their student loans. They didn't get it for free, but they were saying it's the same way that they talked about that they talk about abortion.
But if I could just get a yes or no, because your running mate, J.D. Vance, has said that you would veto it if it did come to your desk.
Well, I didn't discuss it with J.D. In all fairness, J.D., and I don't mind if he has a certain view, but I think he was speaking for me, but I really didn't. Look, we don't have to discuss it, because she'd never be able to get it, just like she couldn't get student loans. They couldn't get student loans. They didn't even come close to getting student loans. They taunted young people and a lot of other people that had loans. They can never get this approved. So it doesn't matter what she says about going to Congress. So wonderful. Let's go to Congress, do it. But the fact is that for years, they wanted to get it out of Congress and out of the federal government. And we did something that everybody said couldn't be done. And now you have a vote of the people on abortion.
Vice President Harris, want to give you your time to respond, but I do want to ask, would you support any restrictions on a woman's right to an abortion?
I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. And as you rightly mentioned, nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and in asking for an abortion. That is not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. What is happening in our country? Working people, working women who are working 1 or 2 jobs, who can barely afford childcare as it is, have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to do it, and what you are putting her through is unconscionable. And the people of America have not, the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this issue has been on the ballot, in red and blue states both, the people of America have voted for freedom.
Vice President Harris,
excuse me, I have to respond. Another lie. It's another lie. I have been a leader on IVF, which is fertilization. The IVF, I have been a leader. In fact, when they got a very negative decision on IVF from the Alabama courts, I saw the people of Alabama and the legislature 2 days later voted it in. I've been a leader on it. They know that, and everybody else knows it. I have been a leader on fertilization, IVF. And the other thing, you should ask, will she allow abortion in the 8th month, 9th month, 7th month?
Come on.
Okay, would you do that? Why don't you ask her that question?
Why don't you answer
That's
the
problem.
question? Would you
because
veto?
under Roe v.
Answer
Wade,
the question,
you
would you
could
veto?
you could do abortions in the 7th month, the 8th month, the 9th
That's
month,
not true.
and probably after birth. Just look at the governor, former governor of Virginia. The governor of Virginia said, we put the baby aside and then we determine what we want to do with the baby.
President Trump, thank you.
We're going to turn now to immigration and border security. We know it's an issue that's important to Republicans, Democrats, voters across the board in this country. Vice President Harris, you were tasked by President Biden with getting to the root causes of migration from Central America. We know that illegal border crossings reached a record high in the Biden administration. This past June, President Biden imposed tough new asylum restrictions. We know the numbers since then have dropped significantly. But my question to you tonight is, why did the administration wait until 6 months before the election to act? And would you have done anything differently from President Biden on this?
So I'm the only person on this stage who has prosecuted transnational criminal organizations for the trafficking of guns, drugs, and human beings. And let me say that the United States Congress, including some of the most conservative members of the United States Senate, came up with a border security bill, which I supported. And that bill would have put 1,500 more border agents on the border to help those folks who are working there right now overtime, trying to do their job. It would have allowed us to stem the flow of fentanyl coming into the United States. I know there are so many families watching tonight who have been personally affected by the surge of fentanyl in our country. That bill would have put more resources to allow us to prosecute transnational criminal organizations for trafficking in guns, drugs, and human beings. But you know what happened to that bill? Donald Trump got on the phone, called up some folks in Congress, and said, kill the bill. And you know why? Because he'd prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And understand, this comes at a time where the people of our country actually need a leader who engages in solutions, who actually addresses the problems at hand. But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised. And I'm going to actually do something really unusual, and I'm going to invite you to attend one of Donald Trump's rallies, because it's a really interesting thing to watch. You will see during the course of his rallies, he talks about fictional characters like Hannibal Lecter. He will talk about windmills cause cancer. And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom. And I will tell you, the one thing you will not hear him talk about is you. You will not hear him talk about your needs, your dreams, and your desires. And I'll tell you, I believe you deserve a president who actually puts you first. And I pledge to you that I will.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so, that would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border?
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies.
Gotcha
I
question.
said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country. And if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids.
I just want to clarify here. You bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from
but
television.
But the people on television saying their dog was eaten by the people.
What makes a city manager an expert?
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election, I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a 4-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you. Because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people, not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people who's were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper, he was no good, I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book, because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they? But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any sitting president in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier. So let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher because of them. They allowed criminals, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes, but it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in, and all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country. But
excuse me, the FBI they were defrauding statements. They didn't include the worst cities. They didn't include the cities with the worst crime. It was a fraud. Just like their number of 818,000 jobs that they said they created turned out to be a fraud.
President Trump, thank you. I'll let you respond, Vice President Harris.
Well, I think this is so rich coming from someone who has been prosecuted for national security crimes, economic crimes, election interference, has been found liable for sexual assault, and his next big court appearance is in November at his own criminal sentencing. And let's be clear where each person stands on the issue of what is important about respect for the rule of law and respect for law enforcement. The former vice president called for defunding federal law enforcement, 45,000 agents, get this, on the day after he was arraigned on 34 felony counts. So let's talk about what is important in this race. It is important that we move forward, that we turn
She got confused there
on this same old tired rhetoric and address the needs of the American people, address what we need to do about the housing shortage, which I have a plan for, address what we must do to support our small businesses, address bringing down the price of groceries. But frankly, the American people are exhausted with this same old tired playbook.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
Excuse me. Every one of those cases was started by them against their political opponent. And I'm winning most of them, and I will win the rest on appeal. And you saw that with the decision that came down just recently from the Supreme Court. I'm winning most of them. But those are cases, it's called weaponization. Never happened in this country. They weaponized the Justice Department. Every one of those cases was involved with the DOJ, from Atlanta and Fani Willis to the Attorney General of New York and the DA in New York. Every one of those cases. And then they say, oh, he's a criminal. They're the ones that made them go after me. By the way, Joe Biden was found essentially guilty on the documents case. And what happened in my documents case? They said, oh, that's the toughest of them all. A complete and total victory. 2 months ago, it was thrown out. It's weaponization, and they used it, and it's never happened in this country. They used it to try and win an election. They're fake cases.
President Trump, thank you. A really quick response here, Vice President Harris, on this notion of weaponization of the Justice Department.
Well, let's talk about extreme and understand the context in which this election in 2024 is taking place. The United States Supreme Court recently ruled that the former president would essentially be immune from any misconduct if he were to enter the White House again. Understand, this is someone who has openly said he would terminate, I'm quoting, terminate the Constitution of the United States, that he would weaponize the Department of Justice against his political enemies. Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized. I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy with a fake Russia investigation
we do have a lot
that went nowhere.
We have a lot to get to. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president,
they haven't even
you
mentioned
to ban
that he was
fracking.
shot.
Now you don't. You wanted mandatory government buyback programs.
Yeah,
now your campaign says you don't. You supported decriminalizing border crossings. Now you're taking a harder line. I know you say that your values have not changed. So then why have so many of your policy positions changed?
So my values have not changed, and I'm going to discuss every one of the, at least every point that you've made. But in particular, let's talk about fracking, because we're here in Pennsylvania. I made that very clear in 2020. I will not ban fracking. I have not banned fracking.
Total dodge.
In fact, I was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which opened new leases for fracking. My position is that we have got to invest in diverse sources of energy so we reduce our reliance on foreign oil. We have had the largest increase in domestic oil production in history because of an approach that recognizes that we cannot over-rely on foreign oil. As it relates to my values, let me tell you, I grew up a middle-class kid raised by a hardworking mother who worked and saved and was able to buy our first home when I was a teenager. The values I bring to the importance of home ownership, knowing not everybody got handed $400 million on a silver platter and then filed bankruptcy 6 times, is a value that I bring to my work, to say we are going to work with the private sector and home builders to increase 3 million homes, increase by 3 million homes by the end of my first term. My work that is related to having a friend when I was in high school who was sexually assaulted by her stepfather. And my focus then on protecting women and children from violent crime is based on a value that is deeply grounded in the importance of standing up for those who are most vulnerable. My work that is about protecting Social Security and Medicare is based on long-standing work that I have done, protecting seniors from scams.
This is the question.
My values have not changed. And what is important is that there is a president who actually brings values and a perspective that is about lifting people up and not beating people down. And name calling. The true measure of the leader is the leader who actually understands the strength is not in beating people down, it's in lifting people up. I intend to be that president.
President Trump, your
Well,
response?
first of all, I wasn't given $400 million. I wish I was. My father was a Brooklyn builder, Brooklyn, Queens, and a great father, and I learned a lot from him. But I was given a fraction of that, a tiny fraction, and I built it into many, many billions of dollars, many, many billions. And when people see it, they are even surprised. So we don't have to talk about that. Fracking, she's been against it for 12 years. Defund the police, she's been against that forever. She gave all that stuff up very wrongly, very horribly, and everybody's laughing at it, okay? They're all laughing at it. She gave up at least 12 and probably 14 or 15 different policies. Like, she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out, wait a minute, I'm talking now, if you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out in Minnesota and wanted to let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis, she went out and raised money to get them out of jail. She did things that nobody would ever think of. Now she wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this. She wants to confiscate your guns, and she will never allow fracking in Pennsylvania. If she won the election, fracking in Pennsylvania will end on day one. Just to finish, one thing so important in my opinion. So I got the oil business going like nobody has ever done before. When they took over, they got rid of it, started getting rid of it, and the prices were going up the roof. They immediately let these guys go to where they were. I would have been 5 times, 4 times, 5 times higher, because you're talking about 3.5 years ago. They got it up to where I was because they had no choice, because the prices of energy were quadrupling and doubling. You saw what happened to gasoline. So they said, let's go back to Trump. But if she won the election, the day after that election, they'll go back to destroying our country, and oil will be dead. Fossil fuel will be dead. We'll go back to windmills, and we'll go back to solar, where they need a whole desert to get some energy to come out. You ever see a solar plant? By the way, I'm a big fan of solar, but they take 400, 500 acres of desert
President
soil.
Trump, we have a
These
lot
are
of
not good
issues
things
that we
for the
have to get to.
environment that
We're
she
out of time.
understands.
Thank you.
Lindsay, thank you. We have an election in just 56 days. And I want to talk about the peaceful transfer of power, which, of course, we all know is a cornerstone of our democracy, and the role of a president in a moment of crisis. Mr. President, on January 6th, you told your supporters to march to the Capitol. You said you would be right there with them. The country and the world saw what played out at the Capitol that day, the officers coming under attack. Aides in the West Wing say you watched it unfold on television off the Oval Office. You did send out tweets, but it was more than 2 hours before you sent out that video message telling your supporters to go home. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day?
You just said a thing that isn't covered. Peacefully and patriotically, I said during my speech, not later on. Peacefully and patriotically. And nobody on the other side was killed. Ashley Babbitt was shot by an out-of-control police officer that should have never, ever shot her. It's a disgrace. But we didn't do this group of people that have been treated so badly. I ask, what about all the people that are pouring into our country and killing people that she allowed to pour in? She was the border czar. Remember that. She was the border czar. She doesn't want to be called the border czar because she's embarrassed by the border. In fact, she said at the beginning, oh, I'm surprised you're not talking about the border yet. That's because she knows what a bad job they've done. What about those people? When are they going to be prosecuted? When are these people from countries all over the world, not just South America? They're coming in from all over the world, David, all over the world. And crime rates are down all over the world because of it.
But let me just
when are those, David, when are those people going to be prosecuted? When are the people that burned down Minneapolis going to be prosecuted? Or in Seattle? They went into Seattle. They took over a big percentage of the city of Seattle. When are those people going to be prosecuted?
But let me just ask
you. You might ask her that question.
You were the president. You were watching it unfold on television. It's a very simple question as we move forward toward another election. Is there anything you regret about what you did on that day? Yes, sir.
I had nothing to do with that other than they asked me to make a speech. I showed up for a speech. I said, I think it's going to be big. I went to Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington, D.C., and the mayor put it back in writing, as you know. I said, this is going to be a very big rally or whatever you want to call it. And again, it wasn't done by me. It was done by others. I said, I'd like to give you 10,000 National Guard or soldiers. They rejected me. Nancy Pelosi rejected me. It was just 2 weeks ago. Her daughter has a tape of her saying she is fully responsible for what happened. They want to get rid of that tape. It would have never happened if Nancy Pelosi and the mayor of Washington did their jobs. I wasn't responsible for security. Nancy Pelosi was responsible. She didn't do her job.
The question was about you as president, not about former Speaker Pelosi, but I do want Vice President Harris to respond here.
I was at the Capitol on January 6th. I was the vice president-elect. I was also an acting senator. I was there. And on that day, the President of the United States incited a violent mob to attack our nation's capital, to desecrate our nation's capital. On that day, 140 law enforcement officers were injured, and some died. And understand, the former president has been indicted and impeached for exactly that reason. But this is not an isolated situation. Let's remember Charlottesville, where there was a mob of people carrying tiki torches, spewing anti-Semitic hate.
Here comes the fine people.
And what did
I love it.
the president
Here we go.
at the time say? There were fine people on each side.
There it is.
That when it came to the Proud Boys, a militia, the former president said, stand back and stand by. So for everyone watching who remembers what January 6th was, I say, we don't have to go back. Let's not go back. We're not going back. It's time to turn the page. And if that was a bridge too far for you, well, there is a place in our campaign for you to stand for country, to stand for our democracy, to stand for rule of law, and to end the chaos, and to end the approach that is about attacking the foundations of our democracy because you don't like the outcome. And be clear on that point. Donald Trump, the candidate, has said in this election there will be a bloodbath if this and the outcome of this election is not to his liking.
It's a lie.
Yeah,
Let's turn the page on this. Let's not go back. Let's chart a course for the future and not go backwards to the past.
Let me just follow up here.
It was a different term, and it was a term that related to energy because they have destroyed our energy business. That was where bloodbath was. Also, on Charlottesville, that story has been, as you would say, debunked. Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity, Jesse, all of these people, they covered it. If they go an extra sentence, they will see it was perfect. It was debunked in almost every newspaper, but they still bring it up, just like they bring 2025 up. They bring all of this stuff up. I ask you this, you talk about the Capitol. Why are we allowing these millions of people to come through on the southern border? How come she's not doing anything? And I'll tell you what I would do, and I would be very proud to do it. I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The president of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to focus on this next issue to both of you because it really brings us this into focus, truth in these times that we're living in. Mr. President, for 3.5 years after you lost the 2020 election, you repeatedly falsely claimed that you won, many times saying you won in a landslide. In the past couple of weeks leading up to this debate, you have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically.
But
You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it. And they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval. I got almost 75 million votes, the most votes any sitting president has ever gotten. I was told if I got 63, which was what I got in 2016, you can't be beaten. The election, people should never be thinking about an election as fraudulent. We need two things. We need walls. And we have to have it. We have to have borders, and we have to have good elections. Our elections are bad. And a lot of these illegal immigrants coming in, they're trying to get them to vote. They can't even speak English. They don't even know what country they're in practically. And these people are trying to get them to vote. And that's why they're allowing them to come into our country.
I did watch all of these pieces of video. I didn't detect the sarcasm, lost by a whisker. We didn't quite make it. And we should just point out here as clarification, and you know this, you and your allies, 60 cases in front of many judges, many of them
No
Republican,
judge looked at it.
And said
they said we didn't have standing. That's the other thing. They said we didn't have standing, a technicality. Can you imagine a system where a person in an election doesn't have standing? The president of the United States doesn't have standing. That's how we lost. If you look at the facts, and I'd love to have you'll do a special on it. I'll show you Georgia, and I'll show you Wisconsin, and I'll show you Pennsylvania, and I'll show you. We have so many facts and statistics, but you know what? That doesn't matter, because we have to solve the problem that we have right now. That's old news. And the problem that we have right now is we have a nation in decline, and they have put it into decline. We have a nation that is dying, David.
Mr. President, thank you. Vice President Harris, you heard the president there tonight. He said he didn't say that he lost by a whisker. So he still believes he did not lose the election that was won by President Biden and yourself.
He's putting words in his mouth. These are leading questions.
Something that's come up in the last couple of days. This was a post from President Trump about this upcoming election just weeks away. He said, when I win, those people who cheated, and then he lists donors, voters, election officials, he says will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, which will include long-term prison sentences. One of your campaign's top lawyers responded saying, we won't let Donald Trump intimidate us. We won't let him suppress the vote. Is that what you believe he's trying to do here?
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that. And clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And I'm going to tell you that I have traveled the world as Vice President of the United States, and world leaders are laughing at Donald Trump. I have talked with military leaders, some of whom worked with you, and they say you're a disgrace. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and
personal attack,
what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
I'll give you 1 minute to respond, Mr. President.
Let me just say about world leaders. Viktor Orban, one of the most respected men, they call him a strong man. He's a tough person, smart, Prime Minister of Hungary. They said, why is the whole world blowing up? 3 years ago, it wasn't. Why is it blowing up? He said, because you need Trump back as president. They were afraid of him. China was afraid, and I don't like to use the word afraid, but I'm just quoting him. China was afraid of him. North Korea was afraid of him. Look at what's going on with North Korea, by the way. He said Russia was afraid of him. I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world. Look, Viktor Orban said it. He said the most respected, most feared person is Donald Trump. We had no problems when Trump was president. But when this weak, pathetic man that you saw at a debate just a few months ago, that if he weren't in that debate, he'd be running instead of her. She got no votes. He got 14 million votes. What you did, you talk about a threat to democracy. He got 14 million votes and they threw him out of office. And you know what? I'll give you a little secret. He hates her. He can't stand her. But
Mr.
he
President.
got 14 million votes. They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but
Mr.
I'm
President,
okay with it
Mr.
because
President, your time is
I
up.
think we're
Thank
going to
you.
do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now
Yes.
to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held.
Didn't make her
Americans
follow up.
among them.
I
Vice
thought there were
President
going to be
Harris in December, you
commercials.
said, quote, Israel has a right to defend
2.
itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international
Hour
humanitarian
into
law
90
must be
minutes.
respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis, many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters, because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution. And in that solution, there must be security for the Israeli people and Israel, and in equal measure for the Palestinians. But the one thing I will assure you always, I will always give Israel the ability to defend itself, in particular as it relates to Iran and any threat that Iran and its proxies pose to Israel. But we must have a two-state solution where we can rebuild Gaza, where the Palestinians have security, self-determination, and the dignity they so rightly deserve.
President Trump, how would you negotiate with Netanyahu and also Hamas in order to get the hostages out and prevent the killing of more innocent civilians in Gaza?
If I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, she hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror, and they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror. They were broke. Now they're a rich nation, and now what they're doing is they're spreading that money around. Look at what's happening with the Houthis and Yemen. Look at what's going on in the Middle East. This would have never happened. I will get that settled and fast, and I'll get the war with Ukraine and Russia ended. If I'm president-elect, I'll get it done before even becoming president.
Vice President Harris, he says you hate Israel.
That's absolutely not true. I have my entire career and life supported Israel and the Israeli people. He knows that. He's trying to, again, divide and distract from the reality, which is it is very well known that Donald Trump is weak and wrong on national security and foreign policy. It is well known that he admires dictators, wants to be a dictator on day one, according to himself. It is well known that he said of Putin that he can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is well known that he said when Russia went into Ukraine, it was brilliant. It is well known he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear they can manipulate you with flattery and favors. And that is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. That is why we understand that we have to have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting in highest regard our military.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
They're the ones, and she's the one that caused it, that's weak on national security by allowing every nation last month for the year, 168 different countries sending people into our country. Their crime rates are way down. Putin endorsed her last week, said, I hope she wins. And I think he meant it because what he's gotten away with is absolutely incredible. It wouldn't have happened with me. The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent. And I just ask one question. Why does Biden go in and kill the Keystone Pipeline and approve the single biggest deal that Russia's ever made, Nord Stream 2, the biggest pipeline anywhere in the world going to Germany and all over Europe? Because they're weak and they're ineffective. And Biden, by the way,
President
gets paid
Trump,
a lot of money.
Thank you. We have a lot of issues to get to.
We'll be right back with much more of this historic ABC News presidential debate from the
It's a
National
break.
Constitution Center.
You don't get the
here in
full 2
Philadelphia.
minutes
Back in a moment.
because we have a commercial. Let's pause.
Yeah.
She's got the sound bites. They rehearsed it. They drilled it into her.
Yeah. You can see that she's definitely pulling from it.
The resting face that she has when he's talking.
Mm-hmm.
I can't call it what it's called because you're not allowed to say that word.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone knows what resting face that is.
Yeah.
She's looking at him, this smug. And the lies she's telling. We'll get into the fact check at the end, but the lie about the fine people on both sides. Donald Trump was right. If you kept going like 10, 20 seconds, he said, and by that, I don't mean the white supremacists. Because we covered that at our old job. There were historical societies out there protesting, saying, don't take down our statue, right?
Yeah.
The Daughters of the Confederacy. Those are just people who have familial ties to Confederate war heroes, Confederate soldiers, right? So they were there saying, don't get rid of this from an historical perspective, a cultural perspective. So he said he didn't mean the white supremacists, but they lied about it. They continue to lie about it. And the fact that she dredged that up, and she dredged up the bloodbath lie. Donald Trump was talking about an economic bloodbath. And she implies that he means actual blood. Yeah. It's disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful.
She answered that in the transition of power question. And it's like, what? It's just a soundbite, right? So it can play on CNN later, where they're like, Kamala Harris accuses Trump of actual bloodbath against people. They're out of context answers. And there's so many leading questions heading into this. Like they kind of throw Trump under the bus so he has to defend himself with every answer out of the gate, right? Yeah. And it's a horrible tactic. I see it's happening. And when she does have a flustered moment during that second question, they got off of it so fast they moved away because, quote, they had so much more to move on to. And that seems to be, and she's got this crazy other thing. She's been saying, let's see how we got here.
Yeah.
Let's see how we got here. Yeah. She said that 3 times now, 2 or 3 times. It's pretty wild, man.
It is. Listen, they rehearsed it. They beat it into her. They beat in the sound bites. Trump's had some good moments, but she's just lying. She's just lying. And you're right that the questions are leading. There's also something I've noticed when Donald Trump answers a question and then pivots to a similar or different topic, they then put the chyron up for a different topic to suggest that he's off topic. He answered your question, and now he's making an analogy. He's kind of stepping sideways.
Sure.
But they put up the chyron to suggest that he's not answering the question. It really is disgraceful.
And it was her question. That was the thing. That was her question, and he had a rebuttal to, as though he's answering her question. I mean, it's journalistic malpractice, really. I mean, I can feel the left lurching here, right? It's part of the apparatus.
Yeah,
and that's
he's got to land some punches. He's done a good job. We know that she's lying, right? But the average American voter doesn't know that she's lying about this stuff, right? And the average voter sees her say, "Oh, that's not true." Like, "Oh, it must not be true." Donald Trump hasn't been lying, right?
No.
And that line about, well, the city manager says that no one's had their pet stolen. There was just a guy at a city council meeting saying that the migrants are in the park eating the ducks out of the pond. I mean, like, so you found a city manager who says, well, that crime hasn't been reported.
What makes him an expert?
Yeah.
He made a statement. No, I haven't heard of it, so it can't be true. But the other city manager has seen like 4 or 5 of these, and seeing the way they're burning, right? It goes back to that. Look what we're importing. He did talk about how the fabric of America,
I think we're going to be back soon.
it's tearing.
I think we're going to be back soon. Donald Trump took a bullet to the head, and they still haven't brought it up. He had to bring it up himself.
Former President Trump meet face to face for the first time. You're watching C-SPAN's live coverage of the ABC News presidential debate simulcast.
Here we go.
It's just insane. He took a bullet to the
Center
head.
in Philadelphia,
They didn't ask the question.
Here again.
I don't think
they want it. They're not going to. He has to bring it up. He's the only one that's ever shed blood for America.
Tonight. We're going to continue here, and I want to turn to the war in Ukraine. We're now 2.5 years into this conflict. Mr. President, it has been the position of the Biden administration that we must defend Ukraine from Russia, from Vladimir Putin, to defend their sovereignty, their democracy, that it's in America's best interest to do so, arguing that if Putin wins, he may be emboldened to move even further into other countries. You have said you would solve this war in 24 hours. You said so just before the break tonight. How exactly would you do that? And I want to ask you a very simple question tonight. Do you want Ukraine to win this war?
I want the war to stop. I want to save lives that are being people being killed by the millions. It's the millions. It's so much worse than the numbers that you're getting, which are fake numbers. Look, we're in for 250 billion or more, because they don't ask Europe, which is a much bigger beneficiary to getting this thing done than we are. They're in for $150 billion less because Biden and you don't have the courage to ask Europe like I did with NATO. They paid billions and billions, hundreds of billions of dollars when I said, either you pay up or we're not going to protect you anymore. So that's maybe one of the reasons they don't like me as much as they like weak people. But you take a look at what's happening. We're in for 250 to 275 billion. They're into 100 to 150. They should be forced to equalize. With that being said, I want to get the war settled. I know Zelensky very well, and I know Putin very well. I have a good relationship, and they respect your president, okay? They respect me. They don't respect Biden. How would you respect him? Why? For what reason? He hasn't even made a phone call in 2 years to Putin, hasn't spoken to anybody. They don't even try and get it. That is a war that's dying to be settled. I will get it settled before I even become president. If I win, when I'm president-elect, and what I'll do is I'll speak to one, I'll speak to the other, I'll get them together. That war would have never happened. And in fact, when I saw Putin after I left, unfortunately left because our country has gone to hell. But after I left, when I saw him building up soldiers, he did it after I left. I said, oh, he must be negotiating. It must be a good, strong point of negotiation. Well, it wasn't, because Biden had no idea how to talk to him. He had no idea how to stop it. And now you have millions of people dead, and it's only getting worse, and it could lead to World War III. Don't kid yourself, David. We're playing with World War III, and we have a president that we don't even know if where is our president? We don't even know if he's a president.
And just to clarify
they threw him out of a campaign like a dog. We don't even know. Is he our president? But we have a president,
Mr. President,
that doesn't know he's alive.
Your time is up. Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war? Yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal, because we have to stop all of these human lives from being destroyed.
I want to take this to Vice President Harris. I want to get your thoughts on
Trying to force
support
an
for
answer.
Ukraine in this moment, but also as Commander-in-Chief, if elected, how would you deal with Vladimir Putin, and would it be any different from what we're seeing from President Biden?
Well, first of all, it's important to remind the former president, you're not running against Joe Biden, you're running against me. I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans. Let's understand what happened here. I actually met with Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, tried through force to change territorial boundaries, to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. And I met with President Zelensky. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. Days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank, to Poland and Romania. And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. And why don't you tell the 800,000 Polish Americans right here in Pennsylvania how quickly you would give up for the sake of favor and what you think is a friendship with what is known to be a dictator who would eat you for lunch?
Vice President Harris, thank you. We've heard from both of you on Ukraine tonight.
He doesn't get to respond to that?
Hour. I wanted her to respond to something you said earlier. And now,
no,
please, I'll give you a minute here.
No, she's getting no response. Unfair.
Sitting in Moscow, and he wouldn't have lost 300,000 men and women, but he would have been sitting in Moscow. Quiet, please. He would have been sitting in Moscow much happier than he is right now. But eventually, you know, he's got a thing that other people don't have. He's got nuclear weapons. They don't ever talk about that. He's got nuclear weapons. Nobody ever thinks about that. And eventually, maybe he'll use them, and maybe he hasn't been that threatening, but he does have that. Something we don't even like to talk about. Nobody likes to talk about it. But just so you understand, they sent her to negotiate peace before this war started. 3 days later, he went in and he started the war because everything they said was weak and stupid. They said the wrong things. That war should have never started. She was the emissary. They sent her in to negotiate with Zelensky and Putin.
And she just admitted
and she did. And the war started 3 days later. And that's the kind of talent we have with her. She's worse than Biden. In my opinion, I think he's the worst president in the history of our country. She goes down as the worst vice president in the history of our country. But let me tell you something. She is a horrible negotiator. They sent her in to negotiate. As soon as they left, Putin did the invasion.
President Trump, thank you. You did bring up something. You said she went to negotiate with Vladimir Putin. Vice President Harris, have you ever met Vladimir Putin? Can you clarify tonight?
Yet again, I said it at the beginning of this debate, you're going to hear a bunch of lies coming from this fellow. And that is another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I've now met with him over 5 times. The reality is it has been about standing as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding that the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strongmen instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what is at stake here. The President of the United States is commander in chief, and the American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring we stand up for our principles and not sell them for the benefit of personal flattery.
We've talked about Ukraine and Vladimir Putin. I do want to talk about Afghanistan. It came up
Personal
in the
attacks?
first hour of this debate. I want to move on to Afghanistan.
Stoltenberg said Trump did the most amazing thing I've ever seen. He got these countries, the 28 countries at the time, to pay up. He said, I've never seen. He's the head of NATO. He said, I've never seen. For years, we were paying almost all of NATO. We were being ripped off by European nations, both on trade and on NATO. I got them to pay up by saying one of the statements you made before, if you don't pay, we're not going to protect you.
President
Otherwise,
Trump.
we would have never gotten it. He said it was one of the most incredible jobs that he's ever seen done.
Thank you. I want to turn to Afghanistan. It came up in the first hour of the debate, and we witnessed a poignant moment today on Capitol Hill, honoring the soldiers who died in the chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. I do want to ask the Vice President, do you believe you bear any responsibility in the way that withdrawal played out?
Well, I will tell you, I agreed with President Biden's decision to pull out of Afghanistan. 4 presidents said they would, and Joe Biden did. And as a result, America's taxpayers are not paying the $300 million a day we were paying for that endless war. And as of today, there is not one member of the United States military who is in active duty in a combat zone in any war zone around the world, the first time this century. But let's understand how we got
not true.
to where we are. Donald Trump, when he was president, negotiated one of the weakest deals you can imagine. He calls himself a deal maker. Even his national security advisor said it was a weak, terrible deal. And here's how it went down. He bypassed the Afghan government. He negotiated directly with a terrorist organization called the Taliban. The negotiation involved the Taliban getting 5,000 Taliban terrorists released. And get this, and the president at the time invited the Taliban to Camp David, a place of storied significance for us as Americans, a place where we honor the importance of American diplomacy, where we invite and receive respected world leaders. And this former president, as president, invited them to Camp David because he does not again appreciate the role and responsibility of the President of the United States to be commander-in-chief with a level of respect. And this gets back to the point of how he has consistently disparaged and demeaned members of our military, fallen soldiers, and the work that we must do to uphold the strength and the respect of the United States of America around the world.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump, your response to her saying that you began the negotiations with the Taliban.
So if you take a look at that period of time, the Taliban was killing our soldiers, a lot of them, with snipers. And I got involved with the Taliban because the Taliban was doing the killing. That's the fighting force within Afghanistan. They don't bother doing that because, they deal with the wrong people all the time. But I got involved. And Abdul is the head of the Taliban. He is still the head of the Taliban. And I told Abdul, don't do it anymore. You do it anymore, you're going to have problems. And he said, why do you send me a picture of my house? I said, you're going to have to figure that out, Abdul. And for 18 months, we had nobody killed. We did have an agreement negotiated by Mike Pompeo. It was a very good agreement. The reason it was good, we were getting out. We would have been out faster than them, but we wouldn't have lost the soldiers. We wouldn't have left many Americans behind, and we wouldn't have left $85 billion worth of brand new, beautiful military equipment behind. And just to finish, they blew it. The agreement said you have to do this, and they didn't do it. The agreement was terminated by us because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
I want to move on.
And these people did the worst withdrawal, and in my opinion, the most embarrassing moment in the history of our country. And by the way, that's why Russia attacked Ukraine because they saw how incompetent she and her boss are.
President Trump, thank you. I want to move on now to race and politics in this country. Mr. President, you recently said of Vice President Harris, quote, "I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black."
They're going here.
A bigger picture question here tonight. Why do you believe it's appropriate to weigh in on the racial identity of your opponent?
I don't, and I don't care. I don't care what she is. I don't care. You make a big deal out of something. I couldn't care less. Whatever she wants to be is okay with me.
But those were your words. So
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
Vice President Harris, your thoughts on this?
I think it's, I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people. You know, I do believe that the vast majority of us know that we have so much more in common than what separates us, and we don't want this kind of approach that is just constantly trying to divide us, and especially by race. And let's remember how Donald Trump started. He was land, he owned buildings, and he was investigated because he refused to rent property to black families. Let's remember, this is the same individual. A full-page ad in the New York Times calling for the execution of 5 young Black and Latino boys who were innocent, the Central Park 5.
They were convicted first. Oh my God.
Took out a full-page ad calling for their execution. This is the same individual who spread birther lies about the first Black president of the United States. And I think the American people want better than that, want better than this, want someone who understands, as I do, I travel our country. We see in each other a friend. We see in each other a neighbor. We don't want a leader who is constantly trying to have Americans point their fingers at each other. I meet with people all the time who tell me, can we please just have discourse about how we're going to invest in the aspirations and the ambitions and the dreams of the American people? Knowing that regardless of people's color or the language their grandmother speaks, we all have the same dreams and aspirations and want a president who invests in those, not in hate and division.
Vice President Harris, thank you. Lindsay?
President Trump, this is now your 3rd time.
This is the most divisive presidency in the history of our country. There's never been anything like it. They're destroying our country, and they come up with things like what she just said. Going back many, many years, when a lot of people, including Mayor Bloomberg, agreed with me on the Central Park 5, they admitted, they said, they pled guilty. And I said, well, if they pled guilty, they badly hurt a person, killed a person ultimately. And if they pled guilty, then they pled, we're not guilty. But this is a person that has to stretch back years, 40, 50 years ago, because there's nothing now. I built one of the greatest economies in the history of the world, and I'm going to build it again. It's going to be bigger, better, and stronger. But they're destroying our economy. They have no idea what a good economy is. Their oil policies, every single policy. And remember this, she is Biden. You know, she's trying to get away from Biden. I don't know the gentleman, she says. She is Biden. The worst inflation we've ever had, a horrible economy because inflation has made it so bad, and she can't get away with that.
Thank you. Your time is up.
I want to respond to that. I want to just respond briefly. Clearly, I am not Joe Biden, and I am certainly not Donald Trump. And what I do offer is a new generation of leadership for our country, one who believes in what is possible, one who brings a sense of optimism about what we can do instead of always disparaging the American people. I believe in what we can do to strengthen our small businesses, which is why I have a plan. Let's talk about our plans and let's
She has a
compare
plan?
plans. I have a plan to give startup businesses $50,000 tax deduction, to pursue their ambitions, their innovation, their ideas, their hard work. I have a plan, $6,000 for young families for the first year of your child's life to help you in that most critical
Handouts.
stage of your child's development. I have a plan that is about allowing people to be able to pursue what has been fleeting in terms of the American dream by offering a help with down payment of $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's the kind of conversation, I believe, David, that people really want tonight, as opposed to a conversation that is constantly about belittling and name calling. Let's turn the page
Vice President
and move
Harris,
forward.
thank you. Let's turn to policy.
President
Let's
Trump,
turn back
we
to
have
policy.
to move on. President Trump.
Let's turn to policy,
She has
please.
a plan to defund the police. She has a plan to confiscate everybody's gun.
President Trump,
she
we
has
do
a
have to
plan
move
to
on to
not
other
allow
issues.
fracking in Pennsylvania or anywhere else.
Okay.
That's
Mr.
what her
President.
plan is until just recently.
I just need
Lindsay,
to
go ahead.
respond
No,
because
Trump,
the
President
former
Trump,
president has said
no, I'm
something
sorry.
twice that I need to
No,
respond to.
I'm sorry. We're
I just
gonna
need to
move on,
respond
Vice
one
President
time
Harris.
to what he has
President
said
Trump, this
multiple
is
times.
now your
Yes.
third time running for president. You have long vowed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, also known as
This is
Obamacare.
what they're
You have
asking
failed
about?
to accomplish that. You now say you're going to keep Obamacare.
Not
quote,
even on our
unless
radar.
we can do something much better. Last month, you said, quote, we're working on it. So tonight, 9 years after you first started running, do you have a plan, and can you tell us what it is?
Obamacare was lousy health care, always was. It's not very good today. And what I said, that if we come up with something, and we are working on things, we're going to do it and we're going to replace it. But remember this, I inherited Obamacare because Democrats wouldn't change it. They wouldn't vote for it. They were unanimous. They wouldn't vote to change it. If they would have done that, we would have had a much better plan than Obamacare. But the Democrats came up. They wouldn't vote for it. I had a choice to make when I was president. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, never going to be great, or do I let it rot? And I felt I had an obligation, even though politically it would have been good to just let it rot and let it go away. I decided, and I told my people, the top people, and they're very good people. I have a lot of good people in that administration. We read about the bad ones. We had some real bad ones too, and so do they. They have really bad ones. The difference is they don't get rid of them. But let me just explain. I had a choice to make. Do I save it and make it as good as it can be, or do I let it rot? And I saved it. I did the right thing. But it's still never going to be great, and it's too expensive for people. And what we will do is we're looking at different plans. If we can come up with a plan that's going to cost our people, our population, less money and be better health care than Obamacare, then I would absolutely do it. But until then, I'd run it as good as it can be run.
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan.
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not
That's the
president
question?
right now. But if we come up with something, I would only change it if we come up with something that's better and less expensive. And there are concepts and options we have to do that. And you'll be hearing about it in the not too distant future.
Vice President Harris, in 2017, you supported Bernie Sanders' proposal to do away with private insurance and create a government-run healthcare system. 2 years later, you proposed a plan that included a private insurance option. What is your plan today?
Well, first of all, I absolutely support, and over the last 4 years as vice president, private healthcare options. But what we need to do is maintain and grow the Affordable Care Act. But I'll get to that, Lindsay. I just need to respond to a previous point that the former president has made. I've made very clear my position on fracking. And then this business about taking everyone's guns away. Tim Walz and I are both gun owners. We're not taking anybody's guns away. So stop with the continuous lying about this stuff. As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, let's just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. I was a senator at the time when I will never forget the early morning hours when it was up for a vote in the United States Senate. And the late, great John McCain, who you have disparaged as being, you don't like him, you said at the
I
time
didn't like him
because he got caught. He was an American hero. The late, great John McCain, I will never forget that night, walked onto the Senate floor and said, no, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't get rid of the Affordable Care Act. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people watching tonight, you remember what that was like? Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma, if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president and we over the last 4 years have strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we have allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of you, the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And now we have capped the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year. And when I am president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to health care should be a right and not just a privilege of those who can afford it. And the plan has to be to strengthen the Affordable Care Act, not get rid of it,
Vice President Harris, thank
in terms
you.
of where Donald Trump stands on that.
I want to move to an issue that's important for a lot
She made
of
a mistake. At number one, John McCain fought Obamacare for 10 years. But it wasn't only him. It were all of the Democrats that kept it going. And you know what? We can do much better than Obamacare, much less money. But she won't improve private insurance for people, private medical insurance. That's another thing she doesn't want to get. People are paying privately for insurance that have worked hard and made money, and they want to have private. She wants everybody to be on government insurance where you wait 6 months for an operation that you need immediately.
President Trump, thank you. We have another issue that we'd like to get to.
Did.
That's
That's what
important
she
for a
used.
number of Americans, in particular younger voters, and that's climate change. President Trump, with regard to the environment, you say that we have to have clean air and clean water. Vice President Harris, you call climate change an existential threat. The question to you both tonight is, what would you do to fight climate change? And Vice President Harris, we'll start with you. 1 minute for you each.
Well, the former president had said that climate change is a hoax. And what we know is that it is very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who now is either being denied home insurance or it's being jacked up. You ask anybody who has been the victim of what that means in terms of losing their home, having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as vice president over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been vice president. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around the world. Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs. And I'm also proud to have the endorsement of the United Auto Workers and Sean Fain, who also know that part of building a clean energy economy includes investing in American-made products, American automobiles. It includes growing what we can do around American manufacturing and opening up auto plants, not closing them like happened under Donald Trump.
Vice President Harris, thank you.
That didn't happen under Donald Trump. Let me just tell you, they lost 10,000 manufacturing jobs this last month. It's going, they're all leaving. They're building big auto plants in Mexico, in many cases owned by China. They're building these massive plants, and they think they're going to sell their cars into the United States because of these people. What they have given to China is unbelievable, but we're not going to let that. We'll put tariffs on those cars so they can't come into our country, because they will kill the United Auto Workers and any auto worker, whether it's in Detroit or South Carolina or any other place. What they've done to business and manufacturing in this country is horrible. We have nothing because they refuse. You know, Biden doesn't go after people because supposedly China paid him millions of dollars. He's afraid to do it. Between him and his son, they get all this money from Ukraine. They get all this money from all of these different countries. And then you wonder, why is he so loyal to this one, that one, Ukraine, China? Why is he? Why did he get $3.5 million from the mayor of Moscow's wife? Why did she pay him $3.5 million? This is a crooked administration, and they're selling our country down the tubes.
President Trump, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be right back with closing statements from both of our candidates. An historic night, this ABC News presidential debate from Philadelphia. Back in a moment.
So again, Donald Trump took a bullet to the head, and they have not even mentioned it.
Climate change.
We got a question about the Affordable Care Act.
Yep.
We got a question about climate change. We did not get a question about an assassination attempt made on Donald Trump's life. It took Donald Trump bringing it up in the middle of a question about a different topic. If Donald Trump didn't do that, that wouldn't even get any play.
Yeah.
I am stunned. I am stunned that Donald Trump took a bullet, and they have not asked a single question about it.
Right. They came out.
I hope it's in his closing.
Israel, Hamas, race and politics, Affordable Care Act, climate change. These are not the lead issues Americans are polling on right now. Why would you even lead with climate change as a question when inflation's so high and the economy is on the verge of insolvency? Our country's on the verge of insolvency, right?
Yeah.
Why would you even bring these up? It's totally wrong. It's wrong. It's not even contextual. And they're conflating so much. It's almost hard to watch. And again, the questions are coming out hard. They're making Trump try to take a stance while they're throwing these softballish stuff to Harris, man. No wonder they wanted it at NBC. I mean, it's a friendly crowd.
Yeah.
There's not been a single mention of walls.
I was stunned how she accused him of not being able to negotiate a peace deal. But then when he brings up the fact that she went overseas to try and negotiate peace, and she refused to meet with Putin. He said she wanted to meet with Putin, and her answer was, I would never meet with Putin. She went over there to stop a war. 3 days later, war breaks out.
Yeah.
She wants to have it both ways.
Yeah.
She wants to have it both ways. It's actually stunning. Each and every one of these questions have been designed around her answers. I mean, why is a climate change question here? I mean, this is insane. This is absolutely insane.
It's again journalistic malpractice, but it shows you that the apparatus is controlled even in this environment. No wonder she wanted to wait for this moment, right? It had to be the perfect sort of thing for her. And what happened to the muting of the mics thing? And
she claims she's a gun owner.
I know. Like that's total. I want to see it. Like at this point, like show me the body. Like, can you show me how to use it?
How much you want to bet it's a gun that would be banned under her proposal?
Oh, could you imagine? Like, or in the place she lives, she pulls it out and it's got like a 10 out. Right. I mean, that would be delicious, but
if it's a handgun with a rail underneath the barrel for a flashlight, there are assault weapon bans that define that as an assault weapon.
Yeah.
I guess because you could put a bayonet on it or something. I don't know.
Right.
It has been, the questions have been stunning. You mentioned earlier the kind of leading questions, putting words in Donald Trump's mouth.
Yeah.
Leading her. The rebuttal time has been crazy. Listen, Donald Trump before this, he had real reservations about going with ABC, in part because he's suing ABC. I think what this has shown is that his reservations about getting a fair shake from ABC News were probably legitimate. But again, this is a president who was shot in the head. And it isn't a question. What are we doing here?
Especially, like, there was an opportunity inside the question about race politics. I'd have brought it up there. Well, it goes beyond just race.
There is no question about why she wanted Biden out of the race.
Yeah. Yes. Or why he was
pretending that didn't happen. They're pretending it didn't happen.
And this is the elephant in the room question, right? And he's just got to bring up that this lady has not been duly elected to be running for president. She's been selected, not elected.
A reminder, we'll open the phone lines as the debate ends to get your reaction.
Her lines over and over again. She kept coming back to this one line of, "You're going to sell out America for your own praise." It's crazy.
Yeah.
David
Because it was
Muir,
just
and
personal
Lindsay
attacks. All right, here we
Welcome
go.
back tonight. The time has come for closing statements, and Vice President Harris, we begin with you.
So I think you've heard tonight two very different visions for our country. One that is focused on the future, and the other that is focused on the past, and an attempt to take us backward. But we're not going back. And I do believe that the American people know we all have so much more in common than what separates us. And we can chart a new way forward. And a vision of that includes having a plan, understanding the aspirations, the dreams, the hopes, the ambition of the American people, which is why I intend to create an opportunity economy, investing in small businesses, in new families, in what we can do around protecting seniors, what we can do that is about giving hardworking folks a break and bringing down the cost of living. I believe in what we can do together that is about sustaining America's standing in the world and ensuring that we have the respect that we so rightly deserve, including respecting our military and ensuring we have the most lethal fighting force in the world. I will be a president that will protect our fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right of a woman to make decisions about her own body and not have her government tell her what to do. I'll tell you, I started my career as a prosecutor. I was a DA, I was an attorney general, a United States senator, and now vice president. I've only had one client, the people. And I'll tell you, as a prosecutor, I never asked a victim or a witness, are you a Republican or a Democrat? The only thing I ever asked them, are you okay? And that's the kind of president we need right now. Someone who cares about you and is not putting themselves first. I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
Vice President Harris, thank you. President Trump?
So she just started by saying she's going to do this, she's going to do that, she's going to do all these wonderful things. Why hasn't she done it? She's been there for 3.5 years. They've had 3.5 years to fix the border. They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it? She should leave right now, go down to that beautiful White House, go to the Capitol, get everyone together and do the things you want to do, but you haven't done it and you won't do it because you believe in things that the American people don't believe in. You believe in things like we're not going to frack, we're not going to take fossil fuel, we're not going to do things that are going to make this country strong, whether you like it or not. Germany tried that, and within 1 year, they were back to building normal energy plants. We're not ready for it. We can't sacrifice our country for the sake of bad vision. But I just ask one simple question. Why didn't she do it? We're a failing nation. We're a nation that's in serious decline. We're being laughed at all over the world. All over the world, they're laughed. I know the leaders very well. They're coming to see me. They call me. We're laughed at all over the world. They don't understand what happened to us as a nation. We're not a leader. We don't have any idea what's going on. We have wars going on in the Middle East. We have wars going on with Russia and Ukraine. We're going to end up in a third world war, and it'll be a war like no other because of nuclear weapons, the power of weaponry. I rebuilt our entire military. She gave a lot of it away to the Taliban. She gave it to Afghanistan. What these people have done to our country, and maybe toughest of all, is allowing millions of people to come into our country. Many of them are criminals, and they're destroying our country. The worst president, the worst vice president in the history of our country.
President Trump, thank you. And that is our ABC News presidential debate from here in Philadelphia at the National Constitution Center. I'm Lindsay Davis.
And I'm David Muir. Thank you for watching here in the U.S. and all over the world.
You're muted, buddy.
They're done. Let me pause that so it doesn't freeze my screen. X out of it. That was an excellent closing statement from Trump. I wanted to see that earlier on. Kamala Harris lied through her teeth the entire time. I think if you're a Kamala Harris supporter, you love that because she was able to get all the talking points out, all the rehearsed lines out.
Mm-hmm.
But I wish that Trump would have hammered that home throughout the night. You have this plan. Why aren't you doing it? You have this
Why aren't you
plan.
doing it now?
Why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you doing it now? And the answer is either you're batshit crazy and Joe Biden doesn't trust you, or you don't actually want to do it.
Yeah.
Right.
You would have
Because
done it.
if it's any other answer, you would have done it.
I really wish he had said something to the effect of, I'm the only one on this stage that has bled for this country.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's a true statement. And you got to remember, it was her rhetoric that caused that. It was the way they were portraying the president. And when the question came up about race and politics, he should have taken that as the opportunity to spin that and say, it goes just beyond race. It also goes about demagoguery from your enemies and your political opponents, right? And set it up. And someone shot me over that.
I'm shocked that they didn't have a better way to bring that into the conversation. Maybe they assumed it would be a question. I still can't get over that one person on that stage was shot, and there's no question about it. I'm stunned because if it was Kamala Harris who was shot, they would have done a gun control question. They didn't even do a gun control question.
No, they knew not to touch it. They knew not to touch it.
They could have even woven it in saying, Mr. President, you were shot with an AR-15.
Yeah.
Has that changed your mind?
Sure.
Right? That would be a way to even kind of put it against him. I'm stunned. I'm absolutely stunned. I've never heard before that she's a gun owner. I'd like to probe that a little bit more.
Shame on NBC for the whole night. I'm going to start there. I hated the ABC. Sorry, I retract that about the previous. Shame on ABC.
Well, shame on NBC too. But
yeah, well, I guess they probably wouldn't have been as fair. It felt so loaded from the start, man. They were trying to corner him into questions, and that's just, as a moderator. I mean, if it was a judge and jury, at some point the lawyer's got to stand up and say objection, right?
Yeah.
And the falsity from the start. I mean, they came out of the gate with an economy question. That was the first question. It's always the question everybody forgets, right? They'll always remember the last one in the closing statements because that's all they're going to see. And it's like, why come out with the economy? I mean, yeah, it's important. Harris can't really, I guess they got the bad question out of the way first because that's one she really can't take a foot on, right? I mean,
the unemployment stuff was, does she think, and by the way, if you're watching this on Rumble, YouTube, post a comment in the comment section what you thought her biggest lie was. We'll put it on screen. I was stunned at how easily she would just throw out lies. Like the bit about unemployment, that Donald Trump left us with massive unemployment. Well, what do you think happens when Democrat governors and Democrat public health officials all get in a room and decide no one's allowed to go to work anymore? And if you go to work, we'll throw you in jail. Guess what happens?
Right.
People stop going to work. Guess what? My wife was laid off as soon as COVID hit, right? Donald Trump didn't do that. Right. She was working at the time in the oil sector. What did that was the shutdowns, the lockdowns, the lack of demand for oil and natural gas. She was with a company that was servicing frac sites and drilling sites. She wasn't going out there. She was doing like other stuff, like administrative work. But when the economy shut down, one of the reasons that gas got so cheap is that you weren't allowed to drive your car. They were arresting people for paddleboarding alone in the middle of a bay in California. They were arresting them as soon as they got to shore for violating stay-at-home orders. So it drove the economy down. She's saying, oh, that's Donald Trump's fault. Donald Trump, he made a lot of mistakes with that. He bought into the lie that it would just be 2 weeks.
Sure.
2 weeks.
And it's Fauci he was listening to. Remember that, guys. He was lied to about this.
Yeah. So then to claim that he caused it is just insane. It's absolute insanity.
What the hell is an opportunity economy? It sounds like a really fancy catchword. She's used it 3 times. That's her plan. An opportunity economy, tax cuts, small businesses, something about $5 trillion tax cut. I put mudslinging, fill in the rest, BIT, blah, 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 in the note because there's nothing there. It was just like a no plan or a talking point. And then she said she was working with Goldman Sachs, the biggest deal, like the big money in politics, right?
Donald Trump missed an opportunity. Goldman Sachs, he could have been like, "Oh yeah, you're with the banks, great.
Yeah.
Look what the banks have done." She also missed an opportunity when she bragged about the Cheneys endorsing her.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you want that endorsement? You want Dick Cheney, warmonger's endorsement? He missed that opportunity. Just reading some of this. I was really stunned at this. Isn't really a fact check. She was well prepared, and she employed a tactic that I haven't seen used before, where in her answers she would add a little soundbite, like one sentence, that was designed to get Donald Trump to respond to it, to eat up his time. So there, when answers, she answered, she mentioned Donald Trump's loan from his father. The easiest way to get Donald Trump to talk for 20 minutes about a topic is to talk about the loan he got from his father. Right?
Yeah.
She would do this throughout, during every question. She would throw something in there to try and get him off track, knowing that it would be impossible for him not to respond to it. She described herself as a middle-class kid. She was born to two professors.
Yeah.
A biologist. She lived in Canada. So Canada absolutely has
privileged life.
Yeah. She went to a French-speaking school. Absolutely.
Which is wild.
There's a middle class in Canada. But to describe her upbringing, her childhood, as being similar to the average American voter, that's insanity. Because her formative years, she wasn't here. That's not to say that she couldn't learn about America later. But she was born to immigrant parents, and she grew up outside the United States. So painting the picture that she has this middle-class upbringing, making people think that she grew up in any town in America with a white picket fence, it just isn't true. It wasn't true. It never was true. When she claimed that Donald Trump, his plan would hurt families, cost families $4,000. There's universal economic data suggesting that the Biden-Harris inflation has cost the average American family between $20,000 and $30,000. I was begging in my head, begging Trump to respond. You cost the average American family almost $30,000 in the last 4 years, and you're talking about $4,000 to get China and these foreign countries to wise up.
Yeah.
Good
one in there.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think it was, I was trying to get to it. It was Ladish here that somebody mentioned that the biggest lie is that the leaders around the world think Trump is a joke and are laughing at him. And I knew we were going to respond to what people were throwing at us there. That one was pretty wild, right?
That was designed to get him to respond, right?
Yeah, sure was.
And she said it multiple times to try and get him to respond to it, to eat up time, get him off track. The idea that he would sell out America because he likes being praised, which is insane.
Right. And in debates, anytime you've got somebody with a personal attack, that usually means you don't have much more, right? You're going to the lowest level of attack that you have. And I'm sure that was the tactic, right? When you don't know what to say, go after him personally, right? I mean, and she's had a ton of time to practice it.
Yeah. They fact checked him multiple times. Not once did they fact check her. Not once.
Not
and
once.
There were doozies. The bloodbath hoax.
Yeah.
Right? The fine people
on every side. Even Snopes.
Yeah.
I mean, how could you not bring that up? I mean, he did a little bit, but it's shocking that she would still use it. You know? And I think like the second question was towards abortion, which kind of came up. You knew that was going to be a hot topic. I figured that one was going to be in there. Then the 9-month answer, I think he started getting it right at the end there when he's like, so what does it mean? Like, are you going to get rid of it 8 months, 9 months, 10 months? They're like, that doesn't happen. And there's no babies that die outside the womb. And there's cases. You've talked about it. Yeah. There are plenty of cases. And it's just wild. I mean, but she gets to deny it. She gets to lie about it. It's And he called her radical. States' rights of abortion. That was the big point he was making, is we put the hands back in the power of the people, not the nation, because now you get to choose where you get to live and how to vote with that. Really, it's like the ultimate receiving of power back to the people, right? You get to choose now whether you want this or not.
Yeah. I write about it in my abortion book. There are abortions that are performed in the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th months of pregnancy. They happen. And under Roe v. Wade, they weren't supposed to happen. But what Roe v. Wade allowed for was for medically necessary abortions. And those have little air quotes next to them, because what you ended up have happen was doctors fudging what constitutes a medically necessary abortion. There have been cases of women qualifying for late-term abortions when they're supposed to be banned because anxiety and mental illness, being anxious about being a parent. Being a parent is 100% anxiety inducing, right? So they have twisted the language in that to allow those late-term abortions. They absolutely do happen. And the after-birth abortion bit is real. There was a bill in Congress called the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Act. And what that bill was going to do is basically say that if you are born during if a baby is born during a botched abortion, that baby is a human being, it's a citizen of the United States, and must be given life-saving care. What we've seen from Kamala Harris, she voted against that bill. She voted it down, right? That if a baby is born during a botched abortion, that baby shouldn't be mandated to receive life-saving care, because the intention was that the baby die. So why should we give them life-saving care? Tim Walz, and Trump brought it up and she denied it. Trump brought it up. Tim Walz, as governor of Minnesota, has basically blocked the reporting on babies born alive after botched abortions. That's what's happened in recent years. You've seen New York amend their law and remove the requirement that doctors and nurses report how many babies are born alive after botched abortions. If you don't report it,
it doesn't exist.
Doesn't exist. And if it doesn't exist, there's no death to, oh no, that baby wasn't born alive. That baby was a successful abortion, right? So,
and they're dirty lies.
Yeah.
Dirty lies.
Under Tim Walz, Minnesota repealed the requirement for a physician to attempt to preserve the life and health of a born alive infant who survives an abortion procedure. That's all you have to know. That is absolutely true.
Yeah. And after that abortion question, it gets really murky, because they kind of ask. There was a real loss in the way they conducted the questions, because of a lot of the responses and a lot of rebuttals that were coming through. And the next thing they ask is, why has so many of Kamala Harris's policies changed? And Kamala totally dodges the question.
She dodged it. 100%.
She has totally canned answers. I'm not even sure what she was asked by the time she was halfway through the question. Yeah. And she was so far off. And that happens like at the 41-minute mark. And you can see the look of total panic. Like there's a time she's just reaching, man. She's just trying to find those canned answers. She's just trying to revert to something. And they didn't give Trump really a follow-up. And then they got right off of it, right? The question disappears quick. Like they wanted to get it out of the way, but once it started going, they saw that she was suffering with that question, so they got off of it. Which is wild, right? That means you're giving that assist, right? That's like being a head coach talking to the quarterback, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's odd. It's odd how they got out of it. And it's not. I mean, we know why they did it.
She got out of everything. They didn't hold her accountable for everything. And anytime Donald Trump, like they asked Donald Trump, would you sign an abortion ban? He said, I don't even need to answer that.
Yes or no question. And he goes, yes or no question. Yeah.
I don't even need to answer that question because it would never pass. It would never pass. So why would I even need to answer that question? Let's talk about what's possible. And he gave this long answer about it. And they were returned to it. Well, you didn't answer the question. Yes or no? Kamala Harris dodged every question.
Yeah.
Every question. She didn't explain why she thinks that ICE shouldn't be funded. She didn't explain why she's changed her mind on defund the police. She completely dodged it. I'm stunned by it. I mean, I'm not. It was ABC News.
Yeah,
obviously.
but you are stunned by it though. Like it shocks you that they wouldn't go. Like there was the vultures were circling. The death blow is there, right? And they don't take it. And if you got any journalistic integrity, you just got to ask the question, right? And then they take the opportunity not to do it. And then they come out with a peaceful transition of power to segue out of that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a really loaded question because it allows them to go after Trump for J6.
Donald Trump should have taken the peaceful transfer of power, and he should have pivoted to saying they just basically took Joe Biden out to the shed and put him down.
I was waiting for that.
How about peaceful transfer? And he brought it up at one point in the night, but it was like right before a commercial break, right before they're trying to cut him off.
And it would have been a perfect moment.
I can't believe that they didn't even give, even if the question about Joe Biden leaving the race was for Kamala Harris to praise him, they didn't even have the question. We had a president of the United States almost unanimously elected in the primary, forced to step down, right?
Yeah.
A candidate chosen, nominated without receiving a single vote. It didn't even get a question.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have to think that the reason they didn't put that question up there is ABC News, the moderators, wanted to help Kamala Harris distance herself from Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And she had this line. She had this line where Donald Trump said, she is Biden. And it's like she took it literally. And she's like, obviously, I am not Joe Biden. Like, we're not saying you're physically Joe Biden. Joe Biden's on the beach. He's been vacationing for 40% of his presidency.
It was a sophomoric answer. Like it felt really kind of just dumb high schoolish stuff. And during that, Trump realizes it's kind of a loaded question. He kind of touched on January 6th. Then he brought up she was border czar in that question because it was total deflection on his part. But they kept pressuring him on that question, and they kept coming back to him hard on it. And they were pushed there because there was the previous Harris flub, man. Like they were just looking for something to help give her that bump. They're trying to get I saw panic in her eyes. They were trying to help her come back because she had that resting, face the whole time, and she had the darty eyes. So I could tell she was really kind of taken by that one.
That look, I was stunned by that look. That side by side.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a reason that Kamala Harris is losing men more than any other Democrat in modern time. And that image, that side by side of Donald Trump giving an answer and her condescendingly looking at him, not a good look at all.
No. In fact, he even turned the whole "I'm talking" thing on her, so she couldn't use it because he used it first, and that disarmed that kind of Kamala quip. Right? Excuse me, I'm talking. He said the same thing to her. So I thought that was kind of a really brilliant move because you took one of the plays out of one of the arrows out of their quiver, and then they go from peaceful transition of power right into election fraud. Right? You're talking about two of the biggest things that happened during his presidency that the media just lied about. Right? So why would you stack those two questions on each other if you weren't trying to pressure him into something? I mean, it was kind of a masterfully tactical sort of aggression there with the two questions because you're forcing him to defend himself in J6, and now you have to defend yourself on what you said the election was fraudulent, right? I mean, again, malpractice.
And where were they in asking her why did she, for years, say that Donald Trump was illegitimate? I mean, Kamala Harris was one of the Democrats after 2016 to say that Donald Trump didn't legitimately win. I mean, it's stunning how they get a pass for it. The second half of that debate, none of the questions really were of interest for the American people.
No, not a one.
I was stunned by it. And I still keep going back to it. I sound like a broken record. I cannot believe that he was shot in the head and it didn't even come up.
No.
It didn't even come up. He had to try and force it in.
It's a big deal when one of your political opponents is almost assassinated for his beliefs because of rhetoric your opponent created. And then they go to break.
Yeah.
Like she's She's a little bit on the ropes, and they go to break. They go a whole hour without taking that break. Like they had it in their back pocket, and they knew how to pull it out and say she needs a moment to breathe.
Kamala Harris didn't even need to go to that debate because the moderators would have had the same outcome.
Yeah.
If she didn't show up, it would have been the same outcome. I thought that Donald Trump left a few opportunities on the table. I thought he had a few really good lines, good answers. The C spot run, her policies are like 4 sentences, like a book, like C spot run. That was funny. I enjoyed when she interrupted him and he said, "Shh, quiet, I'm talking." And basically he's just like, "See what I did there?" That was funny. I wanted more from Trump, though. I wanted more fire. I hate the side-by-side image. There's really no good way to do it when she's completely and the gall for her to say that he's divisive. She spent that entire time denigrating him, calling him names, saying that everyone hates you, they think you're a joke, and then she has
maniacal without saying it.
And then she has the gall at the very end to say, "I think we saw that I'm the good one, and he's just denigrates people."
Unbelievable. That one grabbed me.
It's hard to wrap your head around. But yeah, no. I mean, if there were a lot of topics tonight that shouldn't have been debate topics, because typically when you have a presidential debate season, you have 3 debates, and you don't get the same topics every time. So there were topics that Donald Trump won so handedly on, forced Joe Biden out of the race, which again, I can't believe that wasn't a question. Like, how do you feel about being the first person in the modern era put on a ticket and never receiving a single vote? Donald Trump got it in there a little bit. When she lied and said that police officers were beaten and killed, Brian Sicknick died of a stroke, unconnected with anything there.
And that's already been fact checked.
Yeah.
It's already been disputed. But stick to the lie, right? Stick to the lie. This sounds like an operation, the way she was running tonight. It sounds like a psyop. Just keep repeating the lies until the people believe it. Yeah. And when they come back from break, what's the question we get? It's not the thing you just talked about. It's not whether the assassination attempt was real. It goes right into Israel Hamas, because Harris needs to fix the Muslim vote, right? I mean, that's what they're saying. They need to have her recover that. And I think she really gave some answers that were just so confusing. Nobody knows where she stands on it. Like, I wasn't sure whether she was calling for a ceasefire or for Hamas to continue, or whether she really wanted the hostages. It was confusing.
She memorized a lot.
Yeah.
Everything. There were a couple times where she got a little off the rails when she was starting to kind of ad lib it. And I think one of the answers that was a little less refined was about climate change, because I don't think she expected that to be a question, because it's crazy.
Yeah.
That's a question instead of the assassination attempt. Donald Trump would literally quote her, and she would just shake her head and say, "That's not true." And the moderators are silent.
Yeah. Right. Don't even fact check her in the moment.
Like, she would say something like, "Oh, you support Trump's Project 2025. And Trump says, "I don't." And then the moderators would be like, "Well, what about that?"
Yeah.
It was so one-sided. It was a tag team match. It was an absolute tag team match. And it just shows that the CNN debate was a trap.
Yeah.
The CNN debate was all about getting Joe Biden out of the race. If the powers that be wanted Biden in the race, the CNN debate would have gone like this, with the moderators' questions, fact checking, and the like. She had this list of things, like, it's almost like she had to say them.
Yeah.
And at the end, she threw in this, like, "and I'm going to protect seniors." That just came out of nowhere. I mean, everyone supports protecting seniors. The fact that her closing statement included, "I'm going to protect seniors," that was completely out of left field.
Yeah.
Completely out of left field. Not saying that you don't want to support seniors, but it was just, it made no sense. It made no sense to be there.
Well, the notions continue, because inside that same first question, when they come back with Israel, she starts to say that Trump is weak on international policy and something about love letters to Kim Jong-un and a Putin endorsement. The same week that Putin endorsed her, essentially, on the world stage, which I thought was crazy.
Yeah.
And Trump's answer is that they're all going to blow themselves up. You're talking about the spheres of terror here. He's like, this thing needs to end. It was kind of a real eye-opening, because he sees a pragmatism that she doesn't have, right? And being pragmatic can be good or bad, but it's usually one of the traits of a person who likes to get deals done, because you're pragmatic, right? You learn things.
This is 4 days ago. Kamala Harris calling for a ban on semi-automatic rifles and pistols.
Unreal.
And tonight, he says, I didn't support a gun ban. She announced it 4 days ago. I mean, This is what we had. We had Donald Trump saying, this is what you support. This is what he says. No, I don't. No, I don't.
Yeah.
No, I don't.
Here it is.
And the moderators are just like, no, she doesn't. No, she doesn't. No, she doesn't.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, Donald Trump lays out his plan, and Kamala Harris is like, no, that's not his plan. Project 2025 is his plan. She released her policies yesterday.
Yeah.
And as we said at the start of the show, when we were doing the pregame, they were copied and pasted from Joe Biden's page so much that if you originally shared the link, the metadata that came up on social media pages said, get out there and vote for Joe Biden.
Joe Biden.
Yeah, it was.
And as I'm thinking, we're getting into a question about the assassination. We might be getting into some gun control questions. We get a question on Afghanistan. And I thought that was kind of meant, I thought it might turn into like a Kamala gotcha question, because clearly everybody watched how that debacle fell apart, right?
Yeah.
And they gave her an opportunity to, she said she agreed to the Afghanistan withdrawal. She agreed with Joe Biden, and we all saw that it was a disaster. So her people had trained her to say, I agreed with the disaster, which is like, that's what you don't want to do on a national stage. I thought that was really her weakest moment, was in that answer. She couldn't really defend it. And Trump just starts with it would never happened in the first place. He just should have said, this is how many tanks we lost. This is how many of these we lost. This is how many people died. This is how many Marines had to use the same toilet for 5 days because nobody would pick them up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
this was
I just thought it was weird.
I thought this was a good line from Trump.
I would say we would both leave this debate right now. I'd like to see her go down to Washington, D.C. during this debate, because we're wasting a lot of time. Go down to, because she's been so bad, it's so ridiculous. Go down to Washington, D.C. and let her sign a bill to close up the border, because they have the right to do it. They don't need bills. They have the right to do it. The president of the United States, you'll get him out of bed. You'll wake him up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Right. You'll say, come on down to the office. Let's sign a bill. If he signs a bill that the border is closed, all he has to do is say it to the Border Patrol, who are phenomenal. If they do that, the border is closed.
Mr.
Those
President,
people are killing many people, unlike J6.
We talked immigration here tonight. I do want to.
You see how the minute he started landing punches, against Biden, you're going to get him out of bed at 4 p.m., wake him up. The moderator said, all right. They never did that for Kamala Harris.
No.
They never did it. There was another good one. Let me play this next one.
In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute. I'm talking now. If you don't mind.
That one right there. Disarmed.
Does that sound familiar?
Oh.
She went out. She
was not ready for that. Like that one genuinely shocked her.
She wanted the interruption, so she said, I'm talking.
Yeah.
I'm talking.
Yeah. She couldn't use it after that though. She couldn't use it.
She couldn't. He took it.
I feel like Tulsi Gabbard told Trump about that one to get ready, right? And then why go to the Affordable Care Act? Like race and politics, Affordable Care Act, climate change.
So it's just so crazy. I mean, he did his best to try and say it's a shitty bill and there's nothing we can do, and they wouldn't even entertain any positive benefits to it. So I had no choice. It doesn't matter.
I had no notes for what Harris said because I was just listening to it, rolling my eyes. I couldn't even get myself to try to type something about what she said there. And
here was
I should have.
Here was the only, again, I cannot believe this. The only part of the debate at all that mentions the fact that he was shot in the head was him trying to force the issue. Here we go.
Someone who has openly expressed disdain for members of our military. Understand what it would mean if Donald Trump were back in the White House with no guardrails, because certainly we know now the court won't stop him. We know J.D. Vance is not going to stop him. It's up to the American people.
Vice President
stop
Harris,
him.
thank you. Lindsay?
Vice President Harris, in your last run for president.
Weaponized, please.
We
This is the one that weaponized, not me. She weaponized.
Yeah.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me. They talk about democracy. I'm a threat to democracy. They're the threat to democracy
President
with a fake
Trump.
Russia investigation
We do have a lot to
that
get-
went nowhere.
Yeah, get him on. He's landing punches. They're coming out there. All you have to do is say the line, I have bled for this country. And he
Every time he started gaining ground on her, they were there to stop him from landing punches. It's almost like this was a boxing match, and anytime he got an upper hand, the ref's breaking it up.
Absolutely. It's having the finger on the scales. I was blown away by it, man. I can't stand the way they went with it.
He talked about a topic I didn't expect him to cover, which was that her father was a Marxist economic professor, which is absolutely true. Absolutely true. And she's shaking her head. He absolutely was an economics professor who taught Marxist economics. Here's the bit. Right here, let me add it to it.
Trump, I'll let you respond.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy.
That was a very good answer from him.
It was great.
Watching these clips, I feel better about it. He missed opportunities. But I mean, listen, he's fighting not just against her, but against the moderators, too.
And that's a tough fight.
Let me find the fact check on the father.
It's just crazy. I mean, he lays out. He has been nothing but an American who has built an empire from money, right? He was given 40 whatever he was given, right? I've seen people piss away entire fortunes for just being pieces of crap because their parents had cash. He turned money into billions. He built buildings all over the world. He was the guy that had his dump trucks start helping with the removal during 9/11. This is the same guy that's gotten awards from African American groups for the kinds of work he's done. I mean, these are things that never get mentioned and never will be mentioned. And it's by design. And they really tried to get him a gotcha on the is she black or whatever she questioned. He's like, I don't care what she is. I don't think she knows what she is, right? That's what I would have said. She is something different every single day.
I mean, he just said, I don't care what she is. I don't care what she is.
Yeah.
Which is completely fine. Her father, Donald Harris. Yeah. Is that name? Yeah. Donald Harris was a Marxist economist. He wrote on Marxist economic theory. That's 100% true. Right. And it's one thing to say she's a Marxist. Lots of Democrats get accused of pushing socialism, pushing Marxism. We've never had a presidential candidate, again, one who was put on the ballot without ever receiving a primary delegate through a vote.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We've never had one whose
Never brought
father
up.
was actually a Marxist economist. I mean, it's true.
Which is wild, right?
Sins of the
'Cause she's
father,
just
sins of the father don't necessarily mean sins of the son or the daughter. I get that, right? But she's attacking Donald Trump for his father's racial tenant policies, which she did. She brought it up.
Yeah.
It's completely fair game for him to correctly say that her father was a Marxist economist.
Yeah. But
because it isn't just that he's a Marxist economist, right? It's that he was in colleges and universities teaching other people to be Marxists. It's one thing if he was just a long, shaggy Marx beard, right, in a cave somewhere, a hermit writing for no one, right? He was shaping the minds of America's youth.
And do you think he was shaping the mind of his daughter at the same time? You just don't hear these things without at least practicing it, right? That's what she knows and understands. And that's what you're getting with her. Man, there was a lot about this that I regret watching it now because of how one-sided the moderators are. And I feel just such a disdain for the moderators tonight for Donald Trump. Like I couldn't even really feel the appearance of being impartial. It didn't feel right tonight. It didn't feel right, and I don't think it was as big a hit as Harris as we wanted it to be.
They're gonna.
Right?
She could have literally gone out on stage and crapped herself, and they'd say, "Oh wow, she was stunning and brave." No matter what she did, they were going to declare victory. She ran the playbook. She was given a playbook. Yeah. She said everything they told her to say.
Yeah. And she ran it well. She did.
When you understand that she was given a playbook and she said everything she was told to say, it rings a little different than going up there and honestly and openly sharing what you actually believe. She didn't actually. Times in the debate, she would say, my policy, my policy, my policy. It was telling that she was talking in terms of her policy, not talking in terms of the first person, what I believe. We've seen what happens when she runs for president on a platform that is her belief system. She lost, as Donald Trump mentioned, out before Iowa, right?
Yeah.
This is a campaign. The reason that she didn't do any interviews, hasn't had any press conferences, is she had to learn the policies that her staffers were creating for her.
Yeah.
She couldn't just go out and say what she believed in. If she says what she actually believes in, well, we know what she believes in. She's made a career out of it, right?
Yeah.
You don't go from sponsoring Bernie Sanders's Medicare for all, abolishing private health insurance, to now saying, actually, I support private health insurance. You don't do that, right? You don't go from we need a mandatory gun buyback in this country to suddenly saying, I don't support that, right? Or we need to. Donald Trump got it in. I told you at the beginning he was going to mention it. The transgender sex change surgeries for illegal aliens. And she looked at him like, what?
Right.
What?
Hey man, listen, I just want to point out that I got the idea that they would shake hands, right? So I would have bet the yes on that one.
Yeah.
And I'm sure somebody was doing the action on that.
They didn't shake hands at the end.
No, they just cut away. But they did shake hands at the beginning. Usually the old school, there was always a handshake at the end and people would try to walk off, but yeah.
Here's a clip from Tim Pool's podcast. Let me just get it. Sorry, trying to download these clips in real time.
Yeah, and oh my goodness, I don't know. It was actually a really weak set of questions, and that garbage in, garbage out. When you're asking garbage questions, you're going to get You're going to get answers that do nothing for the people. And that's really who lost here, is because now we didn't get to hear actual questions that affect us. All we got was questions.
Trump scandal,
people
Trump
on the
scandal,
left.
Trump scandal, Trump scandal.
Trump scandal, yeah.
They were teeing things up. They said in the beginning, we didn't share our questions with Kamala Harris.
Yeah. I have my
But they
doubts.
teed up the questions. Chris Cross saying that Taylor Swift just endorsed Kamala. Yeah, it sounds like she did, which we knew she was going to do. She's literally on videotape saying Trump is Hitler.
Yeah.
Trump is the worst. So not all that surprising. Let me see if I can play this clip. This is from the Tim Pool podcast, but let's just watch the clip.
Different policies, like she was big on defund the police. In Minnesota, she went out. Wait a minute, I'm talking now. She went out. She went out.
He's had so many good ones.
That was so good. That was so good. To let criminals that killed people, that burned down Minneapolis.
She did what he wanted.
She went out and raised money to get him out of jail. She did things that nobody else.
I gotta find a better clip because that's just.
That is a lot of. That's why we don't talk over it.
That's why we don't talk over it. We don't talk over it because it's just hard.
Yeah. And you're watching that for the hilarity of it. Yeah. Politico reports that 11 minutes Taylor Swift endorses Kamala Harris for president. That's a shocker, gang. I mean, it's not like she had that in the playbook. You know, they're just waiting for the debate to end, and boom, out goes the tweet. Right? Unreal. A lot of people are on the old Twitter sphere out there.
The left is saying she was stunning, brave.
Yeah.
All of the anti-Trump Republicans. I still think that Trump should have done a better job of saying, you want to claim Dick Cheney, you can have Dick Cheney.
Wants to do transgender operations on illegal aliens that are in prison. This is a radical left liberal that would do this.
It's a radical left liberal that will do this.
Here's the thing. That's 100% true. It's 100% factual. We ran it at the start. I'm not going to run it again, but CNN did a 3-minute segment yesterday about how that was what she said to the ACLU in 2019. Listen, there were so many things that Donald Trump said that were factually accurate, and she just shook her head no. Yeah. And part of me wishes, listen, Donald Trump is never going to be a policy wonk, right? He's never going to be the go to the policy conventions, give big policy speeches. That's not his deal, right? Big overarching visions. He understands what he wants to do, and he puts people in charge to try and do it. But there were a lot of opportunities for him to hammer her specifically on policy. I don't know. I don't know if he was completely as prepared as he could have been.
Maybe
there were a lot of missed opportunities. And I said this before. Doesn't mean he didn't do a good job. He did an excellent job. They're still going to claim that she won because she was stunning and brave.
Yeah.
But he got all of the points home, other than the fact that he got shot in the head. That was kind of an afterthought.
Because he hammered away on immigration, which, those are the issues. He hammered away on the issues that he knows that his base is most concerned about. And that was the plan from the start. If you don't know what to say, tell the people that immigration's her fault. I mean, I would have done the same. So it's not like it was a playbook. There was a point in the debate where she goes, have you seen a Donald Trump rally?
Yeah.
I suggest people go to a Donald Trump rally. Yeah. And that will be a commercial tomorrow morning.
That should be the commercial. And right there should cut, I'm Donald Trump and I support this message.
Right. And then followed with, everything's 50% more expensive. I suggest you go do a Donald Trump rally and then show a cool Donald Trump rally. Like, why are we not part of the team to get him elected? I think they should hire us. I really do. I think we have our fingers on the pulse of what people are feeling more than others. So
these would not be the questions I would have asked.
No. No, I blame NBC for that one.
ABC.
Oh, I'm tired. That wore me out.
It's like, I know. And you watch it and you're trying to process it. I'll watch it again before I go to bed. I'll probably have more comments tomorrow. We're going to do a podcast tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Let's digest this. Let's think
follow.
about it. Let's think about it. If you're watching us for the first time, welcome. We have a 3 times a week podcast, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, on YouTube, on Rumble, on X, as well as audio edition of the podcast, which is available everywhere audio podcasts are found. It's called The Right Guys Podcast. Recommend that you like, follow, subscribe,
comment,
all that fun stuff, because we want to grow it, and there's a lot we gotta say, and apparently, if we don't talk about the if we don't talk about the assassination attempt, no one's going to, right? If we don't talk about the fact that Joe Biden was given the political equivalent of being taken out back and shot, no one's
the old
gonna
Yeller treatment.
Yeah.
We'll come into you guys tomorrow. It's been a long night. Are we
night.
wrapping this one?
Yeah, let's wrap it. That's it for this edition of our special edition, debate night edition of the Right Guys Podcast. If you like the podcast, again, subscribe everywhere you can find it. YouTube, Rumble, X, all the audio editions as well. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Audible, Podbean, all great things. If you're watching on YouTube or Rumble, those links are in the description. That's it for this special edition. My name is Max McGuire.
I'm Josh Hammerlin.
The fight to take back the country, as we just saw, is not over yet, but the only way we win is if we all stand and fight together. See you next time.